The night Mara Whitlock chose survival over her daughter's soul, the world didn't end. It just stopped pretending to be kind. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. Mothers are supposed to protect. They're supposed to fight until there's nothing left to give. But when power walks through your door wearing a warlord's face, when it offers you a choice between slow death and controlled captivity, when it corners you until every option tastes like poison, what then? This is the story of how love lost to power, how a mother's desperate calculation became her daughter's deepest wound, and how sometimes the cruelest betrayals come wrapped in the language of protection. If you want to see how far this story reaches, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to know where this truth finds its witnesses. The dust arrived before the man. Mara saw it from the east window of the manor's second floor, a column of dirt rising against the late afternoon sky like smoke from a distant fire. She'd been folding linens, her hands moving through the familiar motions while her mind wandered to the garden's failing tomato plants and whether they had enough salt to cure the winter meat. Normal thoughts. Safe thoughts. The dust changed everything. "Mother!" Leora appeared in the doorway, her face pale. At 19, she still had that quality of unfinished youth, all sharp edges and soft centers, her dark hair escaping its braid, her hands never quite knowing what to do with themselves. "There are riders coming. I see them. Father's banner isn't with them." Mara's hand stilled on the linen. Her husband had been dead 3 months now, thrown from a horse during what should have been a routine inspection of the northern fields. The estate had passed to her stewardship by default. There were no sons, no brothers, just her and Leora, and a handful of servants who stayed more out of habit than loyalty. 3 months. Long enough for the wolves to start circling. "How many riders?" Mara asked, keeping her voice level. 12, maybe 15. Leora moved to the window, pressing close to her mother's side the way she used to as a child during thunderstorms. "The lead horse is black, big, military bred." "Military? Of course." Mara felt something cold settle in her chest, that particular dread that comes when you realize the disaster you've been trying not to think about has finally decided to introduce itself. "Go to your room," Mara said. "Change into the blue dress, the high-necked one." "Mother." "Do it now, and fix your hair properly. Braid it tight." Leora's eyes went wide. She understood then. This wasn't a social call. This was the kind of visit that required armor, even if that armor was just a modest dress and carefully arranged hair. "Who is it?" Leora whispered. "I don't know yet, but we're about to find out." The girl fled. Mara listened to her footsteps racing down the hall, then forced herself to breathe slowly, deliberately. She set the linen aside and walked to her own chamber, where she changed from her work dress into something more formal, gray wool, simple but well-made, with no jewelry except her wedding band. The mirror showed her what she already knew, a woman of 42 who looked older, her face carved lean by work and worry, her brown hair shot through with silver she'd stopped trying to hide. She looked like what she was, a widow, vulnerable. By the time she descended the main stairs, she could hear voices in the entrance hall. Her housekeeper, Mrs. Venn, was already there, her usually stern face tight with barely concealed panic. "Madam," Mrs. Venn said, her voice low, "they're asking for you. The leader says he has business with the estate." "Who is he?" "He calls himself Duke Draven." The name hit like a fist. Mara's breath caught. Everyone in the Northern Territories knew that name. Kyle Draven. The general who'd spent 15 years carving order out of chaos in the borderlands, who'd turned bandit-infested wastelands into productive farmland through a combination of strategic brilliance and ruthless force. The crown had rewarded him with a dukedom 2 years ago, cementing his transformation from military commander to landed nobility. He was also known for being utterly without mercy when it came to protecting his interests. "Show him to the study," Mara said. "Offer refreshment. I'll be there shortly." "Madam," he said, "I don't care what he said. Let him wait 5 minutes. I'm not receiving armed men in my entrance hall like a conquered fortress." Mrs. Venn's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Yes, madam." Mara waited until she heard the footsteps retreat, then allowed herself one moment of pure, crystalline fear. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her skirt until they steadied. Whatever this was, she would face it standing. The study had been her husband's domain. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs worn soft from years of use, shelves lined with ledgers documenting 3 generations of careful estate management. Mara had avoided it for weeks after his death, unable to face the ghostly presence of his pipe tobacco and the letters he'd never finished writing. Now she walked in to find that space occupied by something far more dangerous than memory. Cale Draven stood with his back to her, examining the books on the shelf with what seemed like genuine interest. He was tall, taller than she'd expected, with the kind of build that came from years of physical labor and combat training. His clothes were expensive but practical. Dark riding coat, well-fitted trousers, boots that had clearly seen actual use. His hair was black, cut shorter than fashion dictated, and when he turned to face her, his eyes were the color of winter ice. Mrs. Whitlock. His voice was deep, measured. Thank you for receiving me. Duke Draven. She didn't curtsy, didn't offer her hand, just met his gaze and waited. Something flickered across his face, amusement maybe, or respect for her refusal to perform deference. He gestured to the chairs. Shall we sit? I prefer to stand. This may take some time. Then you should probably get to the point. Now he did smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. Direct. I appreciate that. Very well. He pulled a folded document from his coat and set it on the desk between them. 3 months ago, your husband borrowed a substantial sum from one of my financial agents to cover debts related to failed crop yields and livestock losses. The loan was secured against the estate itself. Mara's stomach dropped. That's impossible. My husband would never… The contract is signed and witnessed. I've brought the original for your inspection. She didn't want to look at it. Looking at it would make it real. But she forced herself to step forward, to unfold the paper with hands that had started shaking again. The signature was her husband's. The terms were devastating. 15,000 crowns, due in full within 6 months, or the estate would pass to Draven's holding company. The interest rate was usurious. The penalties for missed payments were catastrophic. This isn't legal, Mara said, but even as she spoke, she knew it was a stupid thing to say. Legal meant nothing when you were dealing with someone who had the power to rewrite definitions. It's entirely legal, witnessed by a magistrate and registered with the territorial courts. Draven's voice remained calm, almost gentle. Your husband was desperate. My agent offered him a solution. He took it. He died before the term was complete. Which is why I'm here to discuss alternative arrangements. Mara looked up sharply. What kind of arrangements? Draven moved to stand beside the desk, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. This close, she could see the faint scar along his jaw, the gray threading through his temples, the absolute certainty in his expression. I'm not interested in destroying your family, Sep, he said. I'm interested in consolidating holdings in this region, yes, but I'm also interested in stability. Throwing a widow and her daughter off their land creates complications. Resentment, the kind of social friction that makes governance difficult. How generous of you to consider our feelings. His smile widened fractionally. I'm being practical, and I'm about to offer you something practical in return. He paused. I need a wife. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Excuse me? I need to marry. For political reasons, for social legitimacy, for a dozen other tedious necessities that come with nobility. I've been avoiding it because most of the available candidates are vapid girls from court families who would make my life intolerable. He gestured vaguely at the room, at her. You, on the other hand, are a capable manager who understands estate administration. You're educated. You're mature enough not to expect romantic nonsense. And you come with property that borders mine, which solves several logistical problems. Mara stared at him. You cannot be serious. I'm entirely serious. Marry me. The debt is forgiven, the estate remains in your family's name, held in trust for your daughter, managed jointly by both of us. You gain protection, financial security, and a significant improvement in social standing. I gain a competent partner and consolidated territory. I'm 42 years old. I'm 45. What does age have to do with anything? I'm not… She stopped, unable to articulate the sheer insanity of what he was suggesting. My daughter would remain here. Under our protection. She could have her pick of suitable matches when the time comes, Better matches than she'd find otherwise, given your current circumstances. Mara's mind was racing, trying to process this, trying to find the trap because there had to be a trap. And if I refuse? Then the debt stands. The estate will be forfeit in 3 months. You and your daughter will have nothing. He said it without inflection, without threat, just stating facts. I'll purchase the land at auction and install a manager. You'll need to find somewhere else to live. You're blackmailing me into marriage. I'm offering you a choice between 2 realistic options. One preserves your dignity and your daughter's future. The other doesn't. She wanted to scream at him, wanted to throw the contract in his face and order him out of her house. But the numbers were right there in black and white. And she knew, with the sick certainty of someone who'd been managing accounts for years, that there was no way to raise 15,000 crowns in 3 months. Not legally. Not without selling everything. And even then it wouldn't be enough. I need time to think, she said. You have until tomorrow evening. I'll be staying at the inn in the village. Send word of your decision there. He picked up the contract, refolded it with precise movements, and tucked it back into his coat. One more thing. What? If you're considering running or hiding assets or any other creative solution, don't. I have auditors reviewing your accounts as we speak. I know exactly what you're worth, down to the last copper piece. There's nowhere to run that I won't find you, and nothing to hide that I won't uncover. He said it matter-of-factly, without menace, which somehow made it worse. You're a monster, Mara whispered. No, I'm a pragmatist. There's a difference. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I don't enjoy this. But I learned a long time ago that sentiment is a luxury most people can't afford, including you. Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the hall, the front door opening and closing with quiet finality. Mara stood alone in the study, her husband's ghost somewhere in the shadows, and tried very hard not to collapse. She didn't hear Leora approach until her daughter was right beside her. I heard, Leora said. Her face was bloodless, her hands twisted together. I heard all of it. You were listening. Of course I was listening, the girl's voice cracked. Mother, you can't actually be considering this. You can't marry that man. He's offering us a way out. A way out? He's demanding you sell yourself like livestock. Don't be dramatic. Dramatic? Mother, he walked in here and threatened to take everything unless you marry him. That's not an offer. That's extortion. Mara turned to face her daughter fully. Leora was trembling, tears starting to track down her cheeks, and something in Mara's chest cracked at the sight. Her girl. Her fierce, idealistic girl who still believed the world operated on principles like justice and fairness. You're right, Mara said quietly. It is extortion, but that doesn't change the reality of our situation. So we fight, we find a lawyer, we contest the debt, with what money, with what connections? Leora, your father left us with nothing but this estate and a stack of debts I'm only now discovering. We're alone. We have no family to appeal to, no powerful friends, no resources beyond these walls. Then we sell the estate ourselves. We start over somewhere else. And live on what? The property is mortgaged. Even if we could sell, the proceeds would barely cover half of what we owe. Leora grabbed her mother's hands. I don't care. I don't care if we're poor. I don't care if we have to work. Anything is better than you marrying a man who threatens you into submission. You're 19 years old, Mara said, and she heard the exhaustion in her own voice. You have no idea what poverty actually means. No idea what happens to women with no money and no protection in a world run by men like Draven. So you're just going to surrender? Just give up and let him win? I'm trying to keep us alive. We're already alive. For how long? Mara pulled her hands free. 3 months from now, when we're on the street with nothing, how alive will we be then? When you're desperate enough to take any work offered, any arrangement proposed, how alive will you feel? Leora flinched. You think I can't survive without luxury? I think you've never had to try, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful you don't know what it's like to choose between dignity and eating. I don't want you to learn. So your solution is to choose degradation now? The word hung in the air between them, ugly and true. Mara walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rust. The field stretched toward the horizon, land her family had worked for generations, land that was about to be taken from them, one way or another. He's not wrong, she said finally. About the practical realities. Marriage to him would secure our position. You'd have a future, real options, safety. I don't want safety if it costs you your freedom. Freedom is another luxury we can't afford. Stop saying that. Leora's voice rose, desperate and furious. Stop talking like we're defeated before we've even tried. We can fight this. We can find another way. There is no other way. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Mara turned to face her daughter again, and she let Leora see the truth in her eyes, the bone-deep exhaustion, the fear she'd been hiding for months, the terrible clarity of their situation. I've been managing the account since your father died. I've seen every number, every debt, every obligation. We're drowning, Leora. We've been drowning for years, and your father's death just made it visible. Then we'll drown together, Leora said fiercely. But we'll drown as ourselves, not as that man's property. It's not about us. It's about you. Don't. Don't make this about protecting me. I don't need that kind of protection. But she did. That was the heartbreak of it. Leora didn't understand yet what could happen to a young woman with no family and no resources. Didn't understand the specific vulnerabilities that came with being female and poor and alone. Mara understood. She'd spent her whole life learning those lessons. I'm not deciding tonight, Mara said. I need to think. We both need to think. There's nothing to think about. The answer is no. Leora, the answer is no, Mother. It has to be no. The girl fled before Mara could respond, her footsteps pounding up the stairs, a door slamming somewhere in the distance. Mara stood alone again, watching the sunset fade, and wondered when exactly she'd lost control of everything. The next 24 hours passed like a fever dream. Mara couldn't sleep. She spent the night in the study, going through ledgers by candlelight, trying to find some overlooked asset, some forgotten reserve that could save them. There was nothing. Her husband had been borrowing against their future for years, making one desperate gamble after another to keep up appearances to maintain the illusion of stability. The truth was, they'd been bankrupt long before he died. By dawn, Mara's eyes burned and her head ached, and she was no closer to a solution. She made herself eat breakfast, though she tasted nothing. Mrs. Venn hovered anxiously, offering tea and sympathy in equal measure, clearly having heard enough to understand the stakes. Leora didn't come down until mid-morning. When she did, her face was set in stubborn lines, her eyes red from crying, but her jaw firm. I won't let you do this, she said without preamble. It's not your decision to make. I'm the reason you're considering it. That makes it my decision. They were in the morning room, sunlight streaming through tall windows that overlooked the garden. It was the same room where Mara had taught Leora to read, where they'd spent countless afternoons with books and embroidery and idle conversation. All those memories felt very far away now. You're my daughter, Mara said carefully. Your welfare is my responsibility, not the other way around. I'm 19, not 9. I can take responsibility for myself. Can you? Do you have any idea how to support yourself, how to navigate a world that views women as commodities to be traded and controlled? I can learn. We can both learn. Learning requires time we don't have. Mara set down her tea. Leora, please, I need you to understand something. This isn't about giving up. It's about choosing the least terrible option from a set of terrible options. Marrying a man who threatened us is the least terrible option? Yes. Because the alternative is watching you suffer in ways I can prevent. Leora was quiet for a moment. Then, what if I said I'd rather suffer than watch you sacrifice yourself? I'd say you don't actually know what suffering means yet, and I'm grateful for that. You're not listening to me. I'm listening, I just disagree. Then you're wrong. The bluntness of it startled a laugh out of Mara, harsh and humorless. Maybe. But I'm still your mother, and I'm still the one who has to make this choice. Why? Why does it have to be you? Because I'm the adult. Because I'm the one with the legal authority. Because... Mara stopped, tried to gather her thoughts. Because this is what mothers do. We make impossible choices so our children don't have to. That's not fair. No, it's not. But fairness is another luxury we've lost. Leora stood abruptly, pacing to the window. There has to be another way. Someone we can ask for help. Someone who would loan us the money. Or, there's no one. I've thought of everyone. There's no one who would risk that kind of capital on a widow and her daughter. What about the crown? Could we appeal directly to... The crown gave Draven his dukedom. They're not going to intervene in a private financial matter on our behalf. Then we run. We leave tonight. Just disappear. He'll find us. He said so himself, and I believe him. Then we fight. We make it so expensive for him to pursue this that he gives up. With what weapons? What leverage? Leora, he has money, connections, legal authority, and armed men. What do we have? Silence. The truth settled over them like ash. This isn't fair, Leora whispered again, and now she was crying. None of this is fair. Mara went to her daughter, pulled her into an embrace. Leora was taller than her now, had been for 2 years, but she still folded into Mara's arms like a child. I know, Mara murmured. I know, sweetheart. I know. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other while the morning light moved across the floor. By afternoon, Mara had made her decision. She sent word to the inn. She would meet with Duke Draven at sunset to discuss terms. Leora begged her to reconsider, wept, argued, finally just clung to her mother's hands and pleaded wordlessly, her eyes huge with desperation. I'm sorry, Mara said. I'm so sorry, but this is the choice I'm making. You're choosing him over me. I'm choosing survival for both of us. That's not survival, that's surrender. Maybe it was both. Draven arrived precisely at sunset, alone this time, riding the same black horse. Mara received him in the study again, this time with a pot of tea prepared and 2 cups set out, a pretense of civility over the violence of what was happening. Mrs. Whitlock, he inclined his head. Duke Draven, please sit. They observed the formalities, tea poured, pleasantries exchanged about the weather and the condition of the roads. The whole performance felt surreal, like play-acting normalcy while everything crumbled. Finally, Mara set down her cup. I have conditions. I'm listening. The estate remains in my family's name, not yours, not a holding company's. It passes to Leora upon my death. Agreed. Leora's independence is guaranteed. She's free to marry whom she chooses, or not marry at all, within reason. I won't permit her to make a match that would compromise the family's position. Define compromise. No criminals, no one with significant debt, no one whose reputation would reflect poorly on the household. He paused. I'm not interested in controlling her life. I'm interested in preventing catastrophically bad decisions. Mara studied him, trying to read truth in those cold eyes. She remains here, at this estate, not relocated to your holdings. For the first year, agreed. After that, we'll need to discuss where we maintain our primary residence. And if I refuse to relocate, then we'll maintain separate residences. I'm not interested in forcing domestic harmony. I'm interested in a functional partnership. You keep saying that. Partnership. But this doesn't feel like partnership. It feels like conquest. Does it matter what it feels like if the practical result is beneficial for both parties? Yes, Mara wanted to scream. Yes, it matters. Feelings matter. Dignity matters. The difference between choice and coercion matters. But what she said was, I want it in writing, all of it, legally binding contracts that protect Leora's interests. Of course, my solicitor will prepare the documents tonight. You'll have them for review tomorrow. And I want your word that you won't, she struggled for phrasing, that you won't treat me as property, that this marriage, whatever it is, maintains some basic respect for my autonomy. Something shifted in his expression, not quite sympathy, but something adjacent to it. I'm not interested in a slave, Mrs. Whitlock. I'm interested in a competent partner. I'll expect you to manage the household, represent the family in social contexts, and contribute to decision-making regarding the estates. In return, you'll have authority, resources, and protection. I won't interfere with how you spend your time, what you read, who you associate with, within the bounds of propriety. What about intimate expectations? His eyebrows rose fractionally. Are you asking if I intend to force myself on you? I'm asking what you expect from this marriage beyond the political and economic benefits. Discretion, loyalty, the appearance of a functional relationship in public. He paused. As for the rest, I'm not a brute. I won't demand anything you're unwilling to give. If that situation changes over time, we're both adults capable of negotiating such matters. If it doesn't, I'll seek satisfaction elsewhere and expect you to pretend not to notice. It was, perhaps, the most honest and transactional description of marriage Mara had ever heard. And if I seek satisfaction elsewhere— Now he did smile, though it was grim. I'd say you're welcome to try, but I'd also remind you that discretion runs both ways. Public scandal serves neither of us. Mara nodded slowly. The tea had gone cold. Outside, the last light was fading from the sky. When? She asked. The wedding? 2 weeks. That gives us time to prepare properly and for you to adjust to the idea. How generous. I'm trying to make this as painless as possible. You're trying to make this palatable. There's a difference. Is there? He stood, buttoning his coat with precise movements. The end result is the same. You get security. I get consolidation. Your daughter gets a future that doesn't involve destitution. Everyone wins. Except that I have to marry a man who threatened to destroy me if I refused. You make it sound so dramatic. I offered you a choice. A choice between disaster and degradation isn't much of a choice. Perhaps not. But it's the choice you have, and you're making the smart one. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I think you'll find I'm not the monster you've decided I am. I'm simply practical about power and how it works. And that's supposed to comfort me? It's supposed to set realistic expectations. I won't lie to you, Mrs. Whitlock. I won't pretend this is a love match or that I'm doing this out of kindness. But I will keep my word, honor the contracts, and treat you with the respect due to my wife and partner. That's more than many women in your position could expect. He was right. That was the most galling part. He was absolutely right, and they both knew it. 2 weeks, Mara said. 2 weeks. My solicitor will call tomorrow with the contracts. Then he was gone again, and Mara was alone with her decision. Leora didn't speak to her for 3 days. The girl stayed in her room, refused meals, wouldn't respond when Mara knocked on her door. Mrs. Venn reported that she was eating a little, at least, taking bread and fruit when it was left outside her door, but otherwise maintaining complete isolation. On the 4th day, she emerged. Mara was in the garden, attempting to salvage what she could from the failing vegetable beds, when she heard footsteps on the gravel path. I'm not going to forgive you for this, Leora said. Mara sat back on her heels, looking up at her daughter. The girl's face was puffy from crying, her hair loose and tangled, her dress wrinkled from days of wear. I know, Mara said. I mean it. I'll never forgive you. I understand. Do you? Do you understand what you're doing? You're selling yourself. You're teaching me that when power shows up and makes demands, we just surrender. Mara pulled off her gardening gloves. I'm teaching you that sometimes survival requires compromise. That's not the same as surrender. It looks the same from where I'm standing. Then maybe you need to stand somewhere else. Leora's face crumpled. How can you be so cold about this? Because if I'm not cold, I'll fall apart. And I can't afford to fall apart right now. Why not? Why do you have to be strong all the time? Why can't you just admit that this is terrible and wrong? And because admitting it doesn't change it. Mara stood, her knees protesting. Yes, it's terrible. Yes, it's wrong. Yes, I hate every part of it. But hating it doesn't make it go away. It doesn't pay the debts or save the estate or protect you from what would happen if I said no. You don't know what would happen. I know enough. I know how the world works. I know what happens to women without resources or protection. I've spent my whole life watching it happen to others, and I'll be damned if I let it happen to you. So instead you let it happen to yourself. Yes, if that's what it takes. They stared at each other across the garden beds, 2 women separated by years and understanding, but bound by blood and love and desperation. I wish Father hadn't died, Leora whispered. So do I. I wish things were different. So do I. I wish you weren't doing this. I know, but I am. Leora wiped her eyes. Will you at least tell me why? Really why? Not the logical reasons or the practical justifications. Why you're actually doing this? Mara thought about lying, about giving her daughter some noble answer about sacrifice and duty. But Leora deserved better than that. Because I'm terrified, she said simply. Because I lie awake at night imagining all the ways this could go wrong if I don't act. Because the thought of you hungry or desperate or vulnerable makes me feel like I'm being torn apart from the inside. Because I love you more than I love myself, and that means I'll do things I hate if it keeps you safe. Even if I don't want you to? Especially then. That's what it means to be a mother. You don't get to choose based on what your child wants. You have to choose based on what they need. And you think I need this? Need you to marry a man who threatens us? I think you need a future, real options. The chance to become whoever you want to become without poverty dictating your choices. Yes, I think you need that. Leora shook her head slowly. You're wrong. What I need is a mother who fights, who shows me that we don't have to accept whatever powerful men decide to impose on us. Then I'm failing you. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Just change your mind. I can't. Won't. Can't and won't. They're the same thing now. Leora turned away, her shoulders shaking. I hate this. I hate all of it. I know, sweetheart. So do I. But hate didn't change anything. It never did. The contracts arrived the next day, delivered by a sharp-eyed solicitor who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Mara spent hours reviewing them, checking every clause, every provision, making sure Draven hadn't hidden some trap in the legal language. He hadn't. Everything he'd promised was there in writing. Leora's protected inheritance, the estate's preservation, Mara's autonomy within the defined bounds of the marriage. It was, in its way, a more generous settlement than most women could expect from this kind of arrangement, which somehow made it worse. She signed them at sunset, her hand steady even though her heart was screaming. The wedding was set for the following Saturday. The village talked, of course. News of the Duke's impending marriage to the widow Whitlock spread like wildfire, generating speculation and gossip and barely concealed judgment. Some thought it romantic, the powerful lord rescuing the distressed widow. Others thought it scandalous, the quick turnaround from mourning to remarriage. Most just thought it was practical, which it was. Mara ignored all of it. She had a household to prepare, arrangements to finalize, and a daughter who still wouldn't look at her without accusation in her eyes. The night before the wedding, Leora finally came to her mother's room. Mara was sitting at her dressing table, staring at her reflection without really seeing it. Tomorrow she would marry a man she barely knew, bind herself to someone who'd threatened her into submission, and smile while doing it because that was what survival required. Mother? Leora's voice was quiet. Come in. The girl stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. She dressed carefully for this conversation, her best dress, her hair properly arranged, adult armor. I've been thinking, Leora said. About? About what you said. About survival and compromise and making impossible choices. She paused. I still think you're wrong. I still think there's another way. But I also think I understand why you're doing this. Mara's throat tightened. Do you? You love me. And love makes people do terrible things sometimes. Yes. But Mother... Leora moved closer, her eyes searching Mara's face. What if love isn't supposed to look like this? What if protecting me means teaching me to fight, not teaching me to submit? I'm not submitting, I'm strategizing. From where I stand, they look the same. Then maybe when you're older, when you face these kinds of choices yourself, you'll see the difference. Leora flinched. I don't want to become the kind of person who sees the difference. I know, but you might not have a choice about that either. They were both quiet for a moment. Then Leora knelt beside her mother's chair, taking Mara's hands in hers. Promise me something, the girl said. What? Promise me that if this becomes unbearable, if he hurts you, if you're truly miserable, you'll leave. That you won't stay just because you think it's what I need. Mara wanted to promise, wanted to give her daughter that reassurance, but she'd already made too many promises she couldn't keep. I promise I'll do what's necessary, she said instead. That's not what I asked. It's the only promise I can make. Leora's eyes filled with tears. I don't want to lose you to this. You won't lose me. I'm still your mother. That doesn't change. Everything changes, you know it does. Yes, everything changed. That was the truth neither of them wanted to speak aloud. Mara pulled her daughter into an embrace, holding her tight, trying to memorize this moment. The weight of Leora in her arms, the smell of her hair, the sound of her breathing. Tomorrow, everything would be different. Tomorrow she would belong, legally and socially, to Kyle Draven. Tomorrow the protection she'd bought for her daughter would come at the cost of her own freedom. But tonight, just for tonight, she could still hold her girl and pretend they had choices. "I love you," Mara whispered, "no matter what happens tomorrow or any day after. That's the one thing that will never change." "I love you too," Leora said. "That's why this hurts so much." They stayed like that until the candles burned low, two women clinging to each other in the darkness, knowing that when the sun rose, everything they'd been would become something else. Something neither of them had chosen, something they'd both have to learn to survive. The morning came too fast. Mara woke to gray light filtering through her curtains and the hollow realization that this was the day. Her wedding day. The words felt foreign even in her own mind, like a phrase from a language she'd never properly learned. She lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, counting her breaths. In, out, as if maintaining that rhythm could somehow keep the world from spinning out of control. A knock at the door shattered the illusion of peace. "Madam?" Mrs. Ven's voice, carefully neutral. "The bath is ready, and the seamstress is here with your dress." "Right, the dress. Because even forced marriages required costumes." Mara pushed herself upright, her body feeling like it belonged to someone else. "I'll be down shortly." The bath was scalding, the way she'd requested. She wanted to feel something, even if it was just pain. The water turned her skin pink, and she scrubbed until her arms ached, as if she could wash away the reality of what was about to happen. The dress was beautiful, which felt like an insult. Cream silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Expensive, but understated. Draven had sent it 3 days ago with a note that read simply, "Something appropriate for the occasion. No endearments, no romantic gestures, just practical instruction." She supposed she should be grateful for the honesty. Mrs. Ven helped her into it, her weathered hands gentle as they fastened the tiny buttons up Mara's spine. The housekeeper's face was carefully blank, but Mara could see the concern in the tightness around her eyes. "You look lovely, madam," Mrs. Ven said quietly. "I look like a sacrifice dressed for the altar." "That's not... It's fine. We both know what this is." The older woman's hand stilled. "For what it's worth, I think you're very brave." "Brave would be saying no. Brave is doing what needs to be done even when it breaks your heart." Mara met Mrs. Ven's eyes in the mirror. "Does it get easier, the heartbreak?" "No, madam, but you get stronger at carrying it." There was nothing to say to that, so Mara just nodded and let the woman finish with the buttons. Leora appeared in the doorway as Mrs. Ven was arranging Mara's hair. The girl was dressed in pale blue, mourning colors, Mara realized with a jolt. Her daughter had chosen to wear mourning to the wedding. "Leora." "Don't." The girl's voice was flat. "I'm here because I have to be, because people will talk if I'm not. But don't ask me to pretend this is something other than what it is." "I'm not asking you to pretend anything." "Good. Because I won't." Leora moved into the room, her movements stiff, controlled. "The guests are arriving. Draven's people mostly. A few from the village. Everyone curious to see the widow sell herself for security. That's enough." "Is it? Is it enough, Mother? Or should I say more? Should I stand up during the ceremony and object? Tell everyone exactly how this marriage came to be?" Mara turned from the mirror to face her daughter directly. "You could. You absolutely could do that. And then what? Do you think Draven would just walk away? Do you think the debt would disappear? Do you think we'd somehow be better off for the scandal?" Leora's jaw clenched. "At least we'd have our dignity. Dignity doesn't keep you fed, doesn't keep a roof over your head, doesn't protect you from the reality of what happens to women with nothing. Stop using me as your excuse for this." The words cracked through the room like a whip. Mrs. Ven quietly excused herself, closing the door with barely a sound. Mara stood slowly, the silk dress rustling. "You think that's what I'm doing? Making excuses?" "I think you've convinced yourself this is noble sacrifice when really it's just fear. You're afraid to fight, afraid to risk everything. So you're choosing the safe option and calling it love." The accusation landed like a blade between Mara's ribs. Maybe because there was truth in it. Maybe because fear had been driving her for months now. Fear of poverty and exposure and all the terrible possibilities she couldn't stop imagining. You're 19 years old, Mara said, and her voice came out harder than she intended. You have no idea what you're talking about. I know you're giving up. I'm surviving. By surrendering. By making an impossible choice in an impossible situation. Mara's control cracked, her voice rising. You want me to fight? Fight what, Leora? Fight the legal system? Fight the fact that your father left us with nothing but debt? Fight the reality that we're two women alone with no resources and no power? Tell me exactly what you want me to fight, because I would love to know what battle you think I can actually win. Leora's face was white, her hands shaking. I want you to fight for yourself. For us. I want you to believe that we're worth more than this. I do believe that. That's exactly why I'm doing this. No. If you believed it, you'd find another way. There is no other way. There's always another way. You're just too scared to look for it. The words hung between them, vicious and final. Mara felt something inside her go very still, very cold. Get out. Mother, get out of this room, right now. Before I say something we'll both regret. Leora stared at her for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. Then she turned and fled, the door slamming behind her hard enough to rattle the windows. Mara stood alone in her wedding dress, breathing hard, her reflection in the mirror showing a woman she barely recognized. Face pale, eyes hollow, dressed in silk like a doll being prepared for display. This was what survival looked like. The ceremony was small, efficient, and utterly joyless. They held it in the estate's garden because Draven had vetoed the idea of a church wedding. I'm not a hypocrite, he'd said when Mara suggested it. I won't stand in front of an altar and make promises about love and devotion when we both know this is a business arrangement. At least he was consistent in his brutal honesty. The magistrate from the village performed the ceremony, stumbling over the words like he'd rather be anywhere else. A handful of guests stood witness, mostly Draven's associates, hard-eyed men who watched the proceedings with the detached interest of people observing a transaction. A few villagers had shown up, drawn by curiosity or the promise of the small reception afterward. Leora stood at the back, her face a mask of controlled grief. Mara repeated the vows mechanically, her voice steady even as something inside her screamed. Draven's responses were equally flat, equally devoid of emotion. When the magistrate pronounced them married, Draven kissed her cheek with the same enthusiasm he might show for signing a contract. Well, he said quietly, for her ears only. That's done. Yes, Mara replied. It is. The reception was worse than the ceremony. At least during the vows she'd had something to focus on, words to repeat, actions to perform. Now she had to stand beside her new husband and accept congratulations from people who looked at her with varying degrees of pity, curiosity, and contempt. Such a lovely match, one of the village women cooed, her eyes bright with malice. And so soon after your dear husband's passing, how fortunate that the Duke was available. How fortunate, Mara echoed, her smile feeling like it might crack her face. Draven navigated it all with practiced ease, his hand at her elbow, proprietary but not affectionate, his responses to well-wishers smooth and appropriate. He was good at this, Mara realized, good at performing the social rituals of his class while revealing absolutely nothing of himself. She wondered if that was a skill he'd learned or something he'd been born with. An hour into the reception, Leora disappeared. Mara noticed her absence like a missing tooth, the space where her daughter should have been suddenly, glaringly obvious. Excuse me, she murmured to Draven, who was deep in conversation with one of his captains about grain shipments. He glanced at her. Problem? I need a moment. Don't be long. There are people you need to meet. It wasn't a request. Mara found Leora in the stables, sitting in an empty stall with her arms wrapped around her knees. The girl's face was blotchy from crying, her carefully arranged hair falling loose around her shoulders. Leora. Go away. I can't. You're going to be missed. Let them miss me. Let them all wonder where the grieving daughter went. Maybe someone will actually ask what I'm grieving. Mara stepped into the stall, her silk dress catching on the rough wood. I know you're angry. Angry? Leora laughed, harsh and broken. I'm devastated, Mother. I just watched you marry a man who threatened to destroy us. I watched you smile and accept congratulations, like this is normal. Like this is fine. Like you didn't just sell yourself to save an estate that's already dying. The estate isn't dying, it's dead. Father killed it with his debts and his bad decisions. And instead of letting it die with dignity, you're propping it up with this obscene bargain. Mara lowered herself to sit beside her daughter, not caring that the straw would ruin her dress. What would you have me do? Tell me. Right now. What would you do differently? I'd let it go. I'd let the estate go. Let the debt go. Let all of it go. We'd start over somewhere new. Just us. On what money? With what prospects? Leora, be specific. How exactly do we survive in this fantasy of yours? I'd find work. You'd find work. We'd manage. What kind of work? What skills do you have that would earn enough to keep us fed and housed? Leora's face crumpled. I don't know. But we'd figure it out. No, we wouldn't. Because there is no work available for women of our class who've fallen on hard times. The only options are positions that would destroy us in different ways. Companion to some awful old woman who'd treat you like a servant, governess to children who'd mock you, or worse, much worse. You don't know that. I know exactly that. I've spent my entire life watching women navigate these realities. I know what happens when you have nothing, and no protection. Leora was crying again, silent tears tracking through the dust on her face. I just want my mother back, the one who was strong, who didn't give up. She's gone, Mara said, and the words came out more brutal than she'd intended. She died the same day your father did. What's left is someone trying very hard to keep you safe in a world that doesn't care about safe. That's all I have left to give you. I don't want safety if it costs you your soul. Then you're going to be disappointed, because my soul is a small price to pay for your future. They sat in silence for a while, the sounds of the reception filtering through the stable walls, laughter, music, the clink of glasses. All of it felt very far away. Finally, Leora spoke. He's going to change you, Draven, living with him, being married to him. It's going to change who you are. Probably. And that doesn't scare you? Everything scares me, but I'm doing it anyway. Leora leaned her head against Mara's shoulder, a gesture from childhood that made Mara's chest ache. I don't know how to watch this happen to you. Then don't watch. Close your eyes, survive it. And when it's over, when you're established and secure and have real choices, remember that I did this so you could have those choices. What if I don't want choices bought with your suffering? Then make sure my suffering counts for something. Build a life that's worth what I paid for it. It was the closest thing to hope Mara could offer. They returned to the reception together, Leora with red eyes and Mara with straw in her hair. If anyone noticed, they were too polite to comment. Draven did notice. His gaze tracked over Mara's disheveled state with cool assessment, but he said nothing, just handed her a glass of wine and steered her toward another group of guests requiring acknowledgement. The rest of the day blurred together. By the time the last guest departed, Mara's face hurt from smiling, her feet ached from standing, and she felt hollowed out like someone had scooped away everything that made her herself and left just a shell going through motions. You did well, Draven said as the final carriage pulled away. They were standing in the entrance hall, the space suddenly feeling enormous and empty. Did I? You played your part convincingly. That's all anyone expects. How reassuring. He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. You're exhausted. Go rest. We'll discuss household arrangements tomorrow. Where will you be sleeping? The East Wing. I've had my things moved there. Your chambers remain yours. I told you I'm not interested in forcing intimacy. It should have been a relief. Instead, it just felt like another reminder of how transactional this all was. Mara climbed the stairs to her room, each step feeling like it required enormous effort. Behind her, she could hear Draven moving through the house, his footsteps confident, claiming the space that was now partially his. No, not partially. Legally, it was entirely his. She was his. That was how marriage worked, even marriages like this one. The thought made her stomach turn. She found Leora waiting in her room, curled up in the window seat like she used to do as a child when she was scared. I thought you'd gone to bed, Mara said. Couldn't sleep, didn't want to be alone. Leora's voice was small. Can I stay here tonight? Of course. They prepared for bed in silence, changing into nightgowns, brushing out their hair. Mara blew out most of the candles, leaving just one burning on the nightstand. They climbed into bed together, and Leora curled against her mother's side the way she hadn't done in years. "It's really over, isn't it?" Leora whispered. "Everything we were. Things change. That doesn't mean they're over." "Feels like it." Mara stroked her daughter's hair, the familiar rhythm soothing to both of them. "We'll adapt. Humans are good at that." "I don't want to adapt to this." "I know, but we will anyway." They lay in the darkness, listening to the house settle around them. Somewhere in the East Wing, Draven was unpacking his life into their home, claiming space, establishing presence. Mara wondered if she'd ever feel like this house belonged to her again. The first week of marriage was a crash course in cohabitation with a stranger. Draven was methodical about everything: his morning routines, his work schedules, his expectations for household management. He rose before dawn, spent 2 hours in the study with correspondence and account books, then toured the estate checking on repairs and improvements he'd already ordered. He consulted Mara on nothing. "These men are reinforcing the north barn," she said one morning, watching from the window as workers swarmed over the structure. "You didn't mention that." "It needed to be done. The foundation was failing." "I know. I've been budgeting for repairs for months, but I would have prioritized the irrigation system first." Draven glanced up from his breakfast. "The barn protects valuable equipment and livestock. It takes precedence. The irrigation system affects crop yields across 3 fields. That's long-term revenue. The barn is a short-term crisis that would create long-term problems if ignored. We'll address irrigation next quarter." It wasn't a discussion. It was a pronouncement. Mara set down her tea with deliberate care. "You said this would be a partnership." "It is. I'm telling you my decisions so you're informed. That's not partnership. That's notification. Would you prefer I ignore you entirely?" "I'd prefer you actually consult me before making major changes to my family's estate." Something flickered in his eyes. Irritation, maybe. "Your family's estate is underwater financially. My capital is what's keeping it functional. That gives me decision-making authority." "Your capital that you're using to control me?" "My capital that I'm using to prevent collapse. If you want to frame that as control, that's your choice." Mara stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I'm going to check on the kitchen gardens. We have gardeners for that. I prefer to do it myself." She left before he could respond, her hands shaking with barely suppressed rage. This was how it would be, she realized. Every decision filtered through him, every choice subject to his approval. She'd traded absolute poverty for comfortable captivity, and the walls were closing in faster than she'd anticipated. Leora watched it all with silent judgment. The girl had stopped arguing, stopped pleading. She just observed, her eyes tracking every interaction between Mara and Draven with the focused intensity of someone documenting evidence for a future trial. "You're doing it again," Leora said one afternoon. They were in the morning room, supposedly working on embroidery, though neither of them had made much progress. "Doing what?" "Letting him make all the decisions, accepting whatever he says without fighting back." "I pick my battles." "You're not picking any battles, you're just submitting." Mara's needle slipped, pricking her finger. A drop of blood welled up, bright red against her pale skin. "What would you have me do? Scream at him over breakfast? Refuse his orders and see what happens?" "Yes, any of that. Anything but this passive acceptance." "This isn't acceptance, this is strategy. Looks like surrender from here." Mara sucked the blood from her finger, the metallic taste sharp on her tongue. "You want to know what surrender looks like? It looks like getting thrown off your land with nothing. It looks like begging for positions in households where you'll be treated like dirt. It looks like making choices no woman should have to make just to survive." "This?" She gestured vaguely at the room, at the house, at the life they were living. "This is compromise. And compromise is how you survive when you're powerless. You're not powerless. You're choosing to be powerless. I'm choosing to be smart. You're choosing to be a coward." The word landed like a slap. Mara stood, her embroidery falling to the floor. "Get out!" "Mother, get out of this room right now before I say something unforgivable." Leora fled, leaving Mara alone with her bleeding finger and her shredded pride. That night, for the first time since the wedding, Draven knocked on her door. Mara was already in bed, trying and failing to sleep. She sat up when she heard the knock, her heart suddenly racing. "Come in." He entered carefully, staying near the door. He'd changed from his day clothes into a simple shirt and trousers, his feet bare. It was the most informal she'd ever seen him. "I wanted to discuss something," he said. "At this hour?" "You're awake." "That doesn't mean I want company." Nevertheless, he moved further into the room but didn't sit. "There's a gathering in 3 weeks. Regional nobility, some crown representatives. We're expected to attend." "As a couple?" "Yes. It will be our first public appearance as married. People will be watching closely to see how we present ourselves." "And how should we present ourselves?" "As a functional partnership, cordial, respectful, united in purpose." Mara laughed, bitter and sharp. "United in purpose, that's rich. It's necessary. Weakness invites predation. If people think our marriage is unstable, they'll probe for leverage. So we perform stability." "Exactly." "For how long? The rest of our lives?" "However long it takes for people to accept our arrangement is normal." Mara drew her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. Difficult, but simple." "There's a difference?" "Simple means there's a clear path forward. Difficult means following that path requires effort and discomfort. Both can be true simultaneously." She studied him in the candlelight, trying to understand what kind of man could be so clinical about human relationships. "Do you ever feel anything, or is everything just strategy and calculation?" His expression didn't change. "I feel plenty. I'm just better at not letting feelings dictate my decisions." "That's not strength. That's damage." "Perhaps, but it's effective." "At what cost?" "At whatever cost is necessary." They looked at each other across the room, two people bound together by contracts and threats, trying to navigate a relationship neither of them had chosen. "I need you to understand something," Draven said finally. "I don't enjoy this. Making you uncomfortable, forcing changes, being the villain in your daughter's story. But I've learned that emotional comfort is a luxury that gets people killed. I'd rather be resented and alive than beloved and destroyed." "Who destroyed you?" The question surprised them both. Draven was quiet for a long moment, then, "No one, everyone. The same wars and politics and brutal realities that destroy everyone eventually. I just learned the lessons faster than most." "And those lessons taught you that love and trust are weaknesses." "They taught me that love and trust are vulnerabilities. Whether they're weaknesses depends on context." "What a lonely way to live." "It's kept me alive." "But has it made you happy?" His smile was cold. "Happiness is another luxury I can't afford." After he left, Mara lay awake for hours, thinking about what it meant to be married to a man who'd traded his capacity for joy for survival, thinking about whether she was becoming the same kind of person, thinking about whether Lyora was right, whether she was choosing powerlessness instead of having it forced upon her. She didn't have answers, just more questions that kept her staring at the ceiling until dawn. The second week brought new complications. Draven's steward, a sharp-faced man named Corwin, arrived with a team of clerks to conduct a full audit of the estate's finances. They set up in the study, spreading ledgers and documents across every surface, asking pointed questions about expenditures and yields and production rates. Mara tried to participate, tried to demonstrate her own competence and knowledge. Corwin listened politely, made notes, and then proceeded to ignore every suggestion she offered. "The household budget can be reduced by 15%, he announced on the third day of the audit. "That's unrealistic," Mara said. "We're already running lean." "There's significant waste in the kitchen accounts. Food costs are too high for a household this size. Those costs include provisions for the servants and field workers. Are you suggesting we feed them less?" "I'm suggesting we negotiate better prices with suppliers and eliminate unnecessary luxuries." "What luxuries? We buy what we need, nothing more." Corwin pulled out a detailed breakdown, sliding it across the desk toward her. 3 different varieties of tea, imported sugar, fresh flowers for the main rooms. These are luxuries. Fresh flowers cost almost nothing. We grow them ourselves. The time spent maintaining ornamental gardens could be redirected to productive crops. Mara looked to Draven, who was watching the exchange with that infuriating calm he always maintained. "You can't be serious about this. Corwin's recommendations are usually sound. His recommendations will make this house feel like a prison. His recommendations will make this estate profitable." "At what cost to quality of life?" "At whatever cost is necessary," Draven said. and Mara heard her own recent words thrown back at her. She left the study before she said something that would make everything worse. She found Leora in the library, supposedly reading, but really just staring out the window. "They're cutting the flower budget," Mara said without preamble. Leora didn't look away from the window. "Of course they are. And reducing food expenditures, and questioning every expense that doesn't directly generate revenue. That's what happens when you let a tyrant control your life. He's not a tyrant, he's just what? Just doing what's necessary? Just being practical? Mother, when are you going to stop making excuses for him? When you stop acting like a child who doesn't understand how the world works." The words came out harsher than Mara intended. Leora flinched, finally turning from the window. "I understand perfectly how the world works," the girl said quietly. "I understand that power crushes everything soft and good. I understand that money matters more than people. I understand that you've accepted that reality instead of fighting it. Fighting it would accomplish nothing. Maybe, but at least I wouldn't have to watch you disappear." "I'm not disappearing. You're already gone. You're just going through the motions of being my mother while becoming his obedient wife." Mara felt something crack inside her. "You know what? I'm done. I'm done justifying my choices to you. I'm done being judged for doing what I think is right. You want to hate me for this? Fine, hate me. But I'm tired of defending myself in my own home." She left Leora in the library and walked out to the gardens, past the ornamental beds that would soon be converted to productive crops, past the reflecting pool that would probably be filled in for being wasteful, out to the edge of the property where the manicured grounds gave way to wild fields. She stood there breathing hard, trying not to scream. This was supposed to be better. She'd made this choice to protect Leora, to ensure their survival, to buy time and space and security. Instead, she was watching everything she cared about being systematically dismantled. Her autonomy, her relationship with her daughter, her sense of self. And the worst part? She didn't know how to stop it. "Mrs. Draven." She turned to find Corwin approaching, his expression professionally neutral. "It's still Mrs. Whitlock," she said. "Legally, it's Mrs. Draven. Legally, perhaps, but I prefer Whitlock." He inclined his head, making no concessions. "The Duke sent me to find you. He wants to discuss the staffing audit." "Of course he does. What's being cut now?" "That's for you to discuss with him." Mara laughed, hollow and broken. "No, you tell me. Right now. What are you recommending?" Corwin hesitated, then pulled out a folded paper from his coat. "We're proposing a 30% reduction in household staff. The estate can't support current employment levels. Those are people's jobs, people's livelihoods. Yes, and the estate's solvency requires difficult decisions." "Mrs. Venn? Is she on the list?" "The head housekeeper position can be absorbed into other duties. She's worked here for 25 years, which is why she'll receive a modest severance." "Modest?" Mara snatched the paper from his hands, scanning the names. People she'd known for years, people who'd served her family faithfully, people who had nowhere else to go. This is cruel. This is business. Business built on destroying lives, business built on reality. The estate was failing. The Duke is correcting that. These adjustments are necessary. Necessary for whom? For everyone who depends on this estate's continued existence, including you and your daughter. The truth of it hit like a fist. He was right. They were all right. The estate had been dying and Draven was performing triage, cutting away what couldn't be saved to preserve the core. But understanding the logic didn't make it hurt less. She returned to the house to find Draven in the study, reviewing more documents. He looked up when she entered, taking in her disheveled state with one quick glance. "You've spoken with Corwin." "You're firing Mrs. Venn. I'm restructuring this household to be sustainable. She has nowhere to go. She'll have references and severance. That's not enough. It's what I can offer within the constraints of financial reality." Mara slammed the paper down on his desk. "Then change the reality. You have money. You could absorb the costs. You could keep these people employed." "I could, but that would be poor stewardship. It would be decent. Decency is expensive. I prefer efficiency. You prefer control. You prefer making everyone dependent on your decisions, your choices, your approval." Draven stood, moving around the desk until they were face to face. "What exactly do you want from me, Mara? You want me to be soft? Sentimental? Run this estate into the ground to preserve your comfort? I told you from the beginning what this was. A practical arrangement. You agreed to those terms. I agreed because I had no choice. You had a choice. You chose this over poverty. You chose security over freedom. You chose to blame me for offering you that choice instead of the circumstances that created it. But don't pretend you're a victim in this. You made a decision. Live with it. The words were brutal, surgical, designed to cut through her defenses and expose the truth she'd been avoiding. She had chosen this. Not freely, not happily, but she had chosen. I hate you, she whispered. I know. But you'll accept the staffing changes anyway, because refusing doesn't change the outcome. It just makes you feel temporarily righteous before reality reasserts itself. He was right. He was always right, and she hated him for it. She left the study, climbed the stairs to her room, and locked the door behind her. Then finally, she let herself cry. Later that night, after the tears had dried and her head ached from the force of them, Mara heard raised voices from somewhere in the house. She opened her door to find Leora in the hallway, still fully dressed, her face flushed with anger. What's happening? I told him what I think of him, Leora said, her voice shaking. I told Draven exactly what kind of monster he is. Mara's blood went cold. Leora, what did you say? The truth, that he's a tyrant who bought you like livestock, that he's destroying everything we built here, that… Where is he? In his study, probably plotting more ways to ruin our lives. Mara hurried down the stairs, dread building with each step. She found Draven in the study, as predicted, standing by the window with a glass of whiskey in his hand. I'm sorry, she said immediately. She's young. She doesn't understand. She understands perfectly well. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. She understands that she hates me, that she blames me for disrupting her comfortable life, that she thinks I'm a villain. She's grieving, her father, the changes, all of it. Her grief doesn't excuse disrespect, and it doesn't change facts. Mara moved further into the room. What did she say? Does it matter? The sentiment was clear enough. I'll talk to her, make her apologize. Don't bother. I don't need her apologies or her approval, but I do need her to understand boundaries. What does that mean? Draven turned from the window, his expression unreadable. It means your daughter needs to learn that actions have consequences. She can hate me privately all she wants. But if she thinks she can insult me in my own house without repercussions, she needs correction. Fear spiked through Mara's chest. What are you planning to do? Nothing dramatic, but she'll be expected to observe proper courtesy going forward. No more outbursts, no more accusations. She'll behave with the decorum appropriate to her position, or she'll find herself with significantly reduced freedoms. You can't punish her for speaking her mind. I can absolutely restrict privileges when behavior violates basic respect. She's my daughter. Discipline is my responsibility. She's a member of my household now. That makes her my responsibility too. No. Mara moved to stand between him and the door, a futile gesture of protection. No. You don't touch this. You don't interfere with my relationship with my daughter. I'm not interfering. I'm establishing boundaries that should have been established already. By controlling her? Making her afraid? By teaching her that the world has expectations and failing to meet them has costs. The way you taught me? His eyes narrowed. You want to compare your situation to hers? Fine. You're an adult who made a calculated decision. She's a child acting out because she doesn't like reality. Those aren't equivalent. She's 19. Then she's old enough to learn that idealism doesn't feed you, that righteous anger doesn't pay debts, that sometimes you have to swallow your pride and adapt. The way I did? Exactly the way you did. Mara felt her world tilt. You want to break her the way you broke me. I didn't break you. You bent rather than breaking. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I stand, I'm broken. Draven set down his glass with careful precision. You're standing in a warm house, wearing expensive clothes with food in your belly and security for your future. If that's broken, most people would envy your fractures. Material security isn't the same as being whole, no, but it's better than being destitute. They stared at each other, the space between them vast and uncrossable. Don't do this, Mara said finally. Don't make her a weapon we use against each other. Whatever you need to prove, whatever point you need to make, prove it with me. Leave her out of it. That's not how this works. Then make it work that way, please. The word came out broken. I'm begging you. You can control me. You already do. But let her keep what's left of her spirit. Don't do to her what you've done to me. For a long moment, Draven was silent. Then, what I've done to you? Mara, all I've done is give you an alternative to poverty. The rest, the resentment, the loss of autonomy, the feeling of being trapped, that's a consequence of the situation, not my personal cruelty. You threatened me into marriage. I offered you a choice between two realistic options. That's not a choice. It's the only kind most people get. You're not special in that regard. The casualness of it, the utter lack of remorse, made something inside Mara snap. I want out, she heard herself say. Draven went very still. Excuse me? I want out of this marriage. I want you gone. I want my life back. That's not possible. Make it possible. Buy out the debt. Transfer the estate back to me. Leave. And live on what? The debt is cleared through our marriage. Severing that marriage reinstates the debt. You'd be exactly where you started. I don't care. Yes, you do. You care very much. That's why you're still here. Mara felt tears starting again, hot and furious. I can't do this anymore. I can't watch you systematically destroy everything I care about while telling me it's for my own good. Then don't watch. Accept it. Adapt to it. But you're not leaving, and neither am I. You can't keep me here. I don't have to. The contracts do that. The law does that. Reality does that. He picked up his whiskey again, taking a slow sip. You made your choice, Mara. Now live with it. She ran. Out of the study, through the hall, out the front door into the night. She ran until her legs burned and her lungs screamed and she collapsed at the edge of the property, gasping for air. Behind her, the house stood solid and implacable, lit from within by warm light that turned its windows into watching eyes. She'd thought she was choosing survival. Instead, she'd chosen a different kind of death. Slower, quieter, but just as final. And there was no way out. She stayed out there until the cold drove her back inside, her dress soaked with dew, her hands numb. When she finally pushed through the front door, the house was dark except for a single lamp burning in the entrance hall. A silent rebuke. Someone had waited up to make sure she returned. Mara climbed the stairs without bothering to be quiet. Let them hear. Let Draven know she'd come back defeated, but not repentant. Leora was waiting in her room, curled up in Mara's bed like she had been as a child during storms. I heard you leave, the girl said. I thought maybe you'd finally run. There's nowhere to run to. There's always somewhere. You're just too scared to look. Mara was too exhausted to argue. She changed out of her ruined dress, hanging it over a chair where it dripped onto the floorboards. When she climbed into bed, Leora shifted to make room but didn't move away. I told him I hate him, Leora whispered. I know. He didn't even care, just looked at me like I was a dog barking. Said children who can't control their emotions shouldn't expect to be treated as adults. He's trying to provoke you. Don't give him the satisfaction. Why not? What else do we have left? Mara had no answer for that. They fell asleep eventually, holding on to each other in the darkness. Two people drowning in different ways, but still trying to keep each other afloat. The morning brought new humiliation. Draven was already at breakfast when Mara came down, his plate half finished, a stack of correspondence beside him. He didn't look up when she entered. Mrs. Venn has been informed of her termination, he said, without preamble. She'll stay on for 2 weeks to train her replacement, then receive her severance. Mara poured herself tea with shaking hands. You couldn't wait? Couldn't discuss it with me first? We discussed it yesterday. You objected. I proceeded anyway. There was nothing left to talk about. She deserves better than this. She deserves employment she can't have. Life is full of disappointments. You're a bastard. Yes, but I'm a bastard who keeps his word and pays his debts. That's more than most people can claim. He finally looked up, his eyes cold and assessing. You ran last night. I needed air. You ran because you are realizing the consequences of your choice and you don't like them. That's understandable but irrelevant. This is your reality now. The sooner you accept it, the easier this becomes. It will never be easy. Then I suppose you'll be uncomfortable for a long time. He returned to his correspondence, dismissing her as thoroughly as if she'd left the room. Mara sat there drinking tea that tasted like ash, feeling the walls close in tighter. Mrs. Venn took the news with her usual stoicism, but Mara saw the way her hands trembled when she folded linens that afternoon. "It's not right," Mara said, finding the woman in the laundry. "You shouldn't be punished for my husband's debts." "It's not punishment, madam. It's just how things are." "Don't be gracious about this. Be angry. Tell me how unfair it is." Mrs. Venn set down the sheet she was folding. "Would that change anything?" "No. But it would make me feel less alone in hating this." The older woman's face softened slightly. "I've worked in service for 40 years. I've seen estates rise and fall, families flourish and collapse. This isn't unusual. It's just your first time seeing how the machinery works up close. The machinery that grinds people up. The machinery that keeps the whole system running. You think the Duke is cruel? Maybe. But he's keeping this estate functional. That means something, even if it costs jobs. How can you defend him?" "I'm not defending him. I'm just not blaming him for doing what he thinks necessary." Mrs. Venn picked up the sheet again, her movements precise. "You married him knowing what he was. Can't be surprised when he acts accordingly." The words stung because they were true. Mara left the laundry feeling hollowed out, like someone had scooped away her insides and left just a shell, walking through familiar rooms. She found Leora in the library again, surrounded by books she wasn't reading. "Mrs. Venn is leaving," Mara said. "I know, I heard the maids talking." Leora's voice was flat. "Who's next? How many people does he need to destroy before he's satisfied? He's not destroying people. He's—" "Don't!" Leora slammed her book shut. "Don't make excuses for him. Not to me, not anymore." "I'm not making excuses. I'm trying to explain—" "Explain what? How systematic cruelty is actually practical? How destroying people's livelihoods is good business? Mother, listen to yourself. You sound like him." The accusation hit harder than it should have. "I'm trying to survive this," Mara said quietly. "By becoming him? By accepting his logic as normal? By not fighting battles I can't win." "You haven't tried fighting any battles. You just surrendered from the start." "What would you have me do? Stage a rebellion with what army? Refuse his orders and watch him exercise his legal authority? Leora, I have no power here. None. The law gives him everything. The contracts give him everything. Fighting just makes me look foolish." "Then look foolish. At least you'd be fighting." "For what? What would I gain except his anger and stricter control?" Leora stood, her face flushed. "You'd gain your self-respect. You'd show me that you're still the woman who raised me. Right now, I don't even recognize you." She left before Mara could respond, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. Mara sank into the chair Leora had vacated, surrounded by books filled with stories where heroes fought impossible odds and won. But this wasn't a story. This was reality, where fighting impossible odds just got you crushed. The gathering Draven had mentioned came faster than Mara expected. 3 weeks felt like 3 days, and suddenly she was being fitted for formal gowns, receiving instruction on the social hierarchies she'd need to navigate, memorizing names and titles and allegiances. "You'll stay close to me," Draven said during one of their preparation sessions. "Let me handle the political conversations. You focus on the social pleasantries." "I'm capable of political conversation." "I'm sure you are, but these people will be looking for weaknesses. Anything you say that seems naive or uninformed will be used against us." "So I'm decoration. You're my wife. There's a difference." "Not from where I'm standing." He sighed, setting down the guest list he'd been reviewing. "Mara, I'm not trying to insult you. I'm trying to protect our position. These people are predators. They'll smile while they tear you apart if they sense vulnerability." "And you think I'm vulnerable?" "I think you're inexperienced with this level of social manipulation." "That's not an insult. It's an observation." "Based on your vast experience destroying people at parties? Based on 15 years navigating military politics where the wrong word could get you killed?" "Yes. I know how these games work." Mara wanted to argue, but the truth was she had no idea how to navigate high nobility. Her family had been comfortable gentry, not aristocrats. She'd never attended court, never moved in circles where every word was a potential weapon. "Fine," she said. "I'll smile and make small talk. But if anyone asks me a direct question, I'm answering. I won't stand there mute like an idiot." "Fair enough. Just remember, say less than you think you should. Reveal nothing personal. And never, under any circumstances, let them see you're uncomfortable." Because showing weakness invites predation. Exactly. It was depressing how quickly she was learning his language. The night before they left for the gathering, Draven appeared at her door again. "We need to discuss sleeping arrangements," he said without preamble. Mara's stomach dropped. "I thought we agreed." "Not that. The estate where we're staying has assigned us a shared suite. Separate bedrooms would raise questions about our marriage." "So we pretend." "Yes, you'll have your own room within the suite, but we'll need to be seen entering and leaving together, maintaining appearances." "Always appearances with you?" "Appearances are reality in these circles. If we appear stable, we are stable. If we appear fractured, we become a target." Mara rubbed her temples where a headache was building. "Is anything about this marriage actually real, or is it all just performance? The legal documents are real, the financial arrangements are real. Everything else is whatever we choose to make it." "How romantic." "I never promised romance. I promised security and partnership. Those don't require sentiment." "They also don't require humanity, apparently." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "You think I enjoy this? Being the villain in your story? Don't you?" "No, but I accept it as the cost of doing what's necessary. Someone has to make hard decisions. Someone has to prioritize survival over sentiment. If that makes me a villain, so be it." "It makes you lonely." "Lonely and alive beats beloved and dead." "Does it? Are you sure about that?" He didn't answer, just turned and left, closing the door quietly behind him. Mara spent the rest of the night packing for the gathering, folding expensive dresses she hadn't chosen, preparing to play a role she hadn't auditioned for, in a performance that would last the rest of her life. They left at dawn, the carriage loaded with luggage and attended by 2 of Draven's men. Leora stood at the window watching them depart, her face a mask of carefully controlled contempt. Mara had tried to say goodbye that morning, but Leora had turned away, refusing even to look at her mother dressed in traveling clothes purchased with Draven's money, leaving in Draven's carriage, playing Draven's wife. "She'll forgive you eventually," Draven said as the carriage rolled down the drive. "You don't know that." "People forgive when they need something. Right now, she doesn't need anything, so she can afford her principles. Give it time." "Is that how you see all relationships? Transactions based on need?" "It's how I see reality. People like to pretend love is pure and unconditional, but it's not. It's built on meeting needs, emotional, physical, financial. Remove the needs, and most relationships collapse." "That's bleak. That's honest." Mara stared out the window at the passing countryside, trying not to think about whether he was right. The journey took 2 days. They stopped at an inn the first night, and true to his word, Draven secured them separate rooms. He was courteous but distant, treating her like a colleague on a business trip rather than a wife. Mara should have been grateful for the distance. Instead, it just made her feel more isolated. The estate hosting the gathering belonged to Duke Ashford, one of the crown's oldest allies. The house was massive, more palace than manor, with formal gardens that stretched for acres and staff who moved like silent ghosts through corridors lined with artwork worth more than most villages. Their suite was on the 3rd floor, overlooking the gardens. It had a shared sitting room with 2 bedrooms branching off, exactly as Draven had described. The furnishings were exquisite, the view breathtaking, and Mara hated every inch of it. "We have an hour before the reception," Draven said, checking his pocket watch. "I suggest you rest. It's going to be a long evening. I'm not tired. Then use the time to prepare mentally. Remember what we discussed. Smile. Say little. Show no weakness." "Exactly." He disappeared into his room, leaving Mara alone in the sitting room. She wandered to the window, looking down at the gardens where servants were setting up for an outdoor portion of the evening's entertainment. Silk pavilions, strings of lanterns, tables already laden with silver and crystal. It was beautiful. It was suffocating. She thought about Leora back at the estate, probably in the library or the gardens, definitely hating every moment Mara was gone. Thought about Mrs. Venn training her replacement, working out her final days with quiet dignity. Thought about all the small destructions that came with survival. A knock at the door startled her. A maid entered with a dress box. "From His Grace, ma'am, for this evening." Inside was a gown in deep emerald silk, cut in the latest court fashion. It was gorgeous. It probably cost more than Mrs. Venn's yearly salary. Mara wanted to throw it out the window. Instead, she let the maid help her into it, stood still while her hair was arranged and jewelry fastened, transformed herself into the ornamental wife Draven needed for this performance. When she emerged from her room, Draven was waiting, dressed in formal black with silver accents. He looked every inch the powerful duke, commanding and remote. He studied her for a moment. "You look perfect." "I look like a doll you've dressed up." "You look like a duchess. There's a difference." "Not from where I'm standing." He offered his arm. "Ready?" "No." "Good, neither am I. Let's go anyway." The reception was held in a ballroom that could have housed a small army. Chandeliers dripping with crystals, walls hung with tapestries, musicians playing in a gallery above. Hundreds of people in expensive clothes, all watching each other with predatory interest. Draven kept his hand at her elbow, steering her through introductions with practiced ease. Lords and ladies whose names she immediately forgot. Military commanders who assessed her like a piece of equipment. Wives who smiled with cold eyes while cataloging every detail of her appearance. "So this is the new Duchess Draven," one woman said, her tone suggesting she found Mara lacking. "How charming! And so quickly after your mourning period, dear. You must have been terribly practical about your grief." Mara felt her face heat, but Draven's hand tightened fractionally on her arm, a warning. "My wife is practical about many things," he said smoothly. "It's one of her strengths." "How fortunate for you. I understand the estate was in quite dire straits before your marriage." "No more dire than most holdings in the current economy." "Of course, though not all widows solve their financial problems by remarrying quite so strategically." The words were honeyed poison. Mara opened her mouth to respond, but Draven spoke first. "Strategy is undervalued in modern marriage. Most people prioritize romance over compatibility and wonder why they end up miserable. My wife and I have no such illusions." He said it like a compliment, but it landed like an insult. Mara felt herself go rigid. The woman laughed, bright and cruel. "How refreshingly honest, though I suppose honesty is all one has when there's no passion to disguise the transaction." "Passion burns out," Draven said. "Compatibility endures, if you'll excuse us." He steered Mara away before she could say anything, guiding her toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. "Let me handle them," he said quietly. "She was insulting us." "Insulting me." "She was probing for weakness. You getting defensive would have confirmed it." "So I'm supposed to stand there while people mock our marriage?" "You're supposed to let me deflect while you remain poised. That's how this works." "This is humiliating." "This is politics. Get used to it." The rest of the evening was a blur of similar encounters. People probing, Draven deflecting, Mara feeling like a specimen under glass. By the time they finally escaped back to their suite, she was trembling with suppressed rage. "That was successful," Draven said, loosening his collar. "Successful? I was treated like a social climber who bought her way into nobility." "You were treated like a newcomer being tested. It's normal." "It was degrading." "It was necessary, and you did well enough." "Well enough? I barely spoke." "Exactly. You let me handle it. That's what I needed." Mara stared at him, this man she'd married, this stranger who controlled every aspect of her life. "I'm not your puppet." "I never said you were." "You treat me like one. Dress me up, move me around, put words in my mouth." "I protect you from saying things that would damage our position." "Our position? You mean your position? I'm just the accessory you needed to legitimize it. That's not fair." "Nothing about this is fair." Her voice rose, cracking. "I gave up everything. My autonomy, my dignity, my relationship with my daughter. And for what? So I can stand beside you at parties while people mock me? So I can smile while you make decisions about my life without consulting me? This isn't partnership, it's ownership." Draven's expression hardened. "You want partnership? Fine. Let's be partners. Tell me what you would have done differently tonight." "I would have defended myself instead of letting you speak for me." "And said what? How exactly would you have responded to Lady Carmichael's insinuations?" "I would have told her." "Told her what? That our marriage was forced by financial necessity? That I threatened you into compliance? That you resent every moment of being my wife? That would certainly establish your independence. It would also destroy any credibility we have." "So I'm supposed to lie? Pretend we're happily married?" "You're supposed to understand that private truth and public presentation are different things. You can hate me in here." He gestured at the suite. But out there, we have to appear united. I'm tired of pretending. Then you're going to be exhausted for the rest of your life, because that's what survival in these circles requires. Mara felt something break inside her. I can't do this. Yes, you can. You're already doing it. No. I mean, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep sacrificing pieces of myself for a marriage I never wanted. I can't keep watching you control everything while telling myself it's for the best. I can't. Her voice broke. I can't keep losing myself and calling it survival. Draven was quiet for a long moment. Then, what do you want me to say? That I'll give you more autonomy? More input into decisions? I can't do that. It would undermine everything I'm trying to build. Then what can you give me? Honesty, security, the knowledge that I'll keep my word and honor our agreements. That's all I have to offer. It's not enough. It's all there is. They stared at each other across the elegant sitting room, two people bound together by contracts and circumstances, unable to bridge the distance between them. Finally, Mara turned toward her bedroom. I'm going to sleep. Just don't. She closed the door behind her, locked it, and stood there breathing hard, trying not to scream. Outside, she heard Draven moving around the sitting room, then his own door closing. She was trapped. In this marriage, in this life, in this gilded cage that looked like security but felt like suffocation, and there was no way out. The next day brought more gatherings, more performances, more careful navigation of social hierarchies. Mara played her part, smiled at the right moments, said as little as possible, let Draven handle everything. She was getting better at being a puppet. That night there was a formal dinner. Mara was seated between an elderly earl who talked endlessly about his hunting dogs and a younger lord who seemed more interested in staring at her neckline than making conversation. Draven was at the other end of the table, deep in discussion with Duke Ashford and several military commanders. She watched him work the table, saw how easily he wielded influence, how naturally he commanded respect. He belonged here in a way she never would. After dinner, there was dancing. Draven claimed the first dance as expected, guiding her through the steps with competent efficiency. You're doing better, he said quietly. I'm getting better at pretending. That's all anyone here does. You're learning the game. I don't want to play games. Then you'll lose. And losing has consequences. The music swirled around them, couples moving in elegant patterns across the polished floor. It looked beautiful. It felt hollow. When the dance ended, Draven was immediately claimed by Duke Ashford's daughter, a stunning woman in her 20s who looked at him with obvious interest. Mara watched them dance, watched the woman laugh at something Draven said, watched him smile in return. A real smile, not the controlled expression he wore with Mara. Something twisted in her chest. Not jealousy exactly, but something adjacent to it. The realization that Draven was capable of warmth, just not with her. Quite the pair, aren't they? A voice beside her. She turned to find a man in his 30s, handsome in a sharp-edged way. Lord Garrett Thorne, we weren't introduced earlier. Duchess Draven. Yes, I know, the famous practical marriage. His smile was knowing. You must be very level-headed to accept such an arrangement. Or very desperate. The honesty surprised them both. Lord Thorne's eyebrows rose. Well, that's refreshingly candid. Was I supposed to pretend otherwise? Most people would, but I appreciate honesty. It's rare in these circles. They talked for a few minutes, carefully neutral conversation about the weather and the estate. But there was something in Lord Thorne's manner that suggested genuine interest rather than social obligation. When Draven returned to claim her for another dance, his expression was thunderous. Who was that? He demanded as they moved across the floor. Lord Thorne, he introduced himself. Stay away from him. Why? Because he's a notorious gossip and social climber. Anything you tell him will be all over court by morning. I didn't tell him anything important. You told him our marriage was born of desperation. I heard you. Mara's step faltered. You were listening? I'm always paying attention to who you're talking to and what you're saying. That's my job. Your job is to spy on me? My job is to protect our reputation, which includes monitoring your interactions. You mean controlling them? I mean preventing you from sabotaging everything I've built. The music ended. Mara pulled away from him, her hands shaking. I need air. Mara? I said I need air. She fled the ballroom, ignoring the curious stares, pushing through doors until she found herself in a garden. The night was cold, her breath fogging, but she didn't care. She walked until she found a bench hidden behind a hedge, collapsed onto it, and finally let herself cry. This was her life now, forever. Being watched, controlled, manipulated, having every word monitored, every interaction assessed for political risk, being a prop in Draven's careful construction of power and respectability. Rough evening? She looked up to find Lord Thorn approaching, a coat draped over his arm. You shouldn't be out here. It's not appropriate. Neither is crying in the garden at a formal event, yet here we are. He offered the coat. You're freezing. She should refuse, should send him away, should go back inside where Draven could monitor her properly. Instead, she took the coat. Thank you. He sat beside her, maintaining a careful distance. Your husband is quite intense. That's one word for it. There are others, controlling, possessive, ruthlessly ambitious. You barely know him. I know his type. Military men who transition to politics often struggle with the difference between commanding soldiers and navigating society. They try to control everything, and it usually ends badly. You sound experienced. My father was similar, tried to orchestrate every aspect of my life. It didn't work out well for either of us. Mara wiped her eyes. What happened? I left. Took what little inheritance my mother left me and built my own life. He never forgave me for choosing independence over obedience. And do you regret it? Every day? And never. It's complicated. They sat in silence for a moment, then Lord Thorn spoke again, his voice careful. If you ever need someone to talk to, someone outside your husband's sphere of control, I'm available. Warning bells went off in Mara's head. This was dangerous. This was exactly the kind of situation Draven had warned her about. But it was also the first genuine kindness anyone had shown her in weeks. I should go back, she said, standing. Of course, but the offer stands. She returned the coat, nodded her thanks, and walked back toward the ballroom. Draven was waiting just inside the doors, his face carved from ice. We're leaving, he said. The event isn't over. I don't care. We're leaving. Now. He marched her through the ballroom, made cursory farewells to their hosts, and practically dragged her back to their suite. The moment the door closed, he rounded on her. What exactly did you think you were doing? Getting air. Like I said, you were alone in a garden with Lord Thorn. Do you have any idea how that looks? I don't care how it looks. Well, you should. Every action you take reflects on me. Every choice you make has consequences for our reputation. Our reputation? You mean yours. I'm just the accessory that makes you look respectable. You're my wife. That makes your behavior my responsibility. I'm not your property. Legally, you essentially are. We both know it. The contracts we signed, the vows we took, they give me authority over you. That's how marriage works. Mara felt rage rising, hot and vicious. You bastard! You absolute bastard! You really think you own me? I think I have the legal right to expect certain behaviors. And tonight, you violated those expectations. I talked to someone. I took a coat because I was cold. That's not a violation. It's basic human interaction. It's a risk I can't afford. You don't understand these people. They'll use anything, any perceived weakness, any hint of marital discord to destroy us. Let them destroy us. At least then I'd be free. The words hung in the air, brutal and honest. Draven went very still. You want out. You really want out. Yes, I want out of this marriage, out of this life, out from under your control. I want my daughter back. I want myself back. I want... Her voice broke. I want to be a person again instead of a possession. That's not possible. Make it possible. No. Why? Why won't you just let me go? You could find another wife, someone who actually wants this, someone who won't fight you every step. Because we have a contract. Because I've invested significant resources in stabilizing your estate. Because dissolving this marriage would make me look weak and unstable. He moved closer. And because you agreed to this. You made a choice. A choice under duress. Still a choice. You can't unmake it just because you don't like the consequences. Mara felt something inside her snap. Without thinking, she grabbed a decorative vase from the side table and hurled it at the wall. It shattered, porcelain fragments scattering across the floor. Draven didn't flinch, just watched her with that infuriating calm. Feel better? No. Good. Because destroying expensive things won't change your situation. Nothing will change my situation. That's the problem. I'm trapped, and you won't even pretend to care. I do care. But caring doesn't mean giving you what you want when what you want would destroy everything I've built. Then you care about the wrong things. Maybe, but those wrong things kept you and your daughter from starving. Forgive me if I prioritize practical concerns over your emotional satisfaction. Mara looked at him, really looked at him, and saw clearly for the first time what she'd married. Not a monster, not even particularly cruel. Just a man so focused on survival and control that he'd lost the ability to see people as anything other than variables in his calculations. You're broken, she said quietly. Something inside you is broken, and you've convinced yourself that makes you strong. For the first time, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Pain, maybe. Or recognition. Perhaps, he said, but broken and functional beats whole and dead. I learned that lesson the hard way. What broke you? The same thing that breaks everyone eventually. Reality. He turned away, moving toward his bedroom. Get some sleep. We're leaving first thing tomorrow. Draven, I'm done talking tonight. We're both angry. Nothing good comes from continuing this. He disappeared into his room, door closing with quiet finality. Mara stood alone in the sitting room, surrounded by shattered porcelain, feeling more trapped than ever. They left at dawn as promised, the carriage ride home conducted in frozen silence. When they finally pulled up to the estate, Mara nearly wept with relief, until she saw Leora's face at the window. The girl wasn't alone. There was a man with her, young, well-dressed, unfamiliar. Draven saw him too. His expression went dark. Who the hell is that? They found out soon enough. The man was Edmund Price, son of a wealthy merchant family, and he'd been calling on Leora every day since they'd left. We've been talking, Leora said, her chin raised defiantly. He's asked me to marry him. Absolutely not, Draven said immediately. You don't get to decide that. I'm your guardian. That's exactly what I get to decide. My mother is my guardian. All eyes turned to Mara. She looked at her daughter, seeing the desperate hope in her eyes, the defiance, the plea for rescue, and felt the weight of the choice crushing down on her. Edmund, she said carefully, could you give us a moment? The young man left reluctantly. The moment the door closed, Leora turned to her mother. Please, please don't let him control this too. Edmund is kind and he loves me and he can take me away from here. You barely know him. I know him better than you knew Draven when you married him. The accusation landed like a blade. Draven stepped forward. This is absurd. The man is a merchant's son. Completely inappropriate. Inappropriate for whom? Mara asked. For Leora? Or for your ambitions? For both. She can do better. Better meaning more politically useful to you. Better meaning matches that would secure her future rather than limit it. Like my match with you secured my future? The words were acid. Draven's jaw tightened. That's different. How? How exactly is it different? You used financial leverage to force me into marriage. Now you want to use guardian authority to control her matches. It's the same pattern. I'm trying to protect her from making a mistake based on emotion rather than reason. She's 19. She's supposed to be emotional. She's supposed to fall in love with inappropriate men and make mistakes. That's what being young means. And I'm supposed to let her ruin her life? You're supposed to let her live it. The argument was spiraling, both of them shouting now, years of suppressed rage pouring out. Leora stood between them, tears streaming down her face. Stop, she whispered, then louder. Stop! Both of you just stop! They fell silent. Leora looked at her mother with eyes full of betrayal and desperate hope. Choose me. For once, choose me over him. Let me marry Edmund. Let me have my own life. And Mara stood there, caught between her daughter's pleading and her husband's authority, between love and survival, between every impossible choice she'd been making since Draven walked into her life. She started. She's not marrying a merchant's son, Draven said flatly. That's final. Something in Mara's chest exploded. "No," she said. Draven turned to her slowly. "Excuse me?" "I said no. You don't get to make that decision alone. We discussed this. I have authority. You have authority over me because I was desperate and you exploited it. You don't have authority over her. Legally. Legally, you're her stepfather. I'm her mother. My word carries weight, too. Not enough to override my veto. Then we'll see what the courts say." The threat hung in the air between them. Draven's face went cold. "You want to challenge me legally? You'll lose, and the process will destroy what's left of your relationship with your daughter. Maybe, but at least I'll have fought for her instead of just surrendering her to your control." "Mother," Leora breathed. Mara turned to her daughter. "I can't promise this will work. I can't promise I can win against him, but I can promise I'll try. Is that enough?" Leora's face crumpled. "I thought you'd given up fighting." "So did I. But watching him try to control your life the way he controls mine," Mara's voice broke. "I can't let him do that to you, too." Draven moved between them, his expression dangerous. "You're making a mistake." "Probably, but it's my mistake to make. This will end badly for everyone." "Then let it end. At least I'll go down fighting instead of just accepting whatever you decide is necessary." They stared at each other, the space between them charged with rage and something that might have been respect under different circumstances. Finally, Draven spoke, his voice quiet and lethal. "Fine. We'll resolve this legally. But understand something, Mara. When I win, and I will win, you'll have nothing left. No autonomy, no input into household decisions, no relationship with your daughter, because she'll blame you for the fight. You'll be exactly what you accused me of making you, property. Is that really what you want?" "I want to fight for my daughter. Everything else is secondary." "Then you're a fool. Better a fool than a coward." The words hung between them, brutal and final. Then Draven turned and walked out, his footsteps echoing through the hall. Leora threw herself into Mara's arms, sobbing, "Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you." Mara held her daughter, feeling the weight of what she'd just done settling over her like a shroud. She'd declared war on a man who had all the weapons, all the power, all the legal authority. She was going to lose. But at least she'd finally fought. The silence after Draven left felt like the aftermath of an explosion, ears ringing, dust settling, damage still being assessed. Mara held Leora until the girl's sobs subsided into hiccuping breaths. When she finally pulled back, her daughter's face was blotchy and swollen, but there was something new in her eyes. Hope, maybe. Or the dangerous belief that her mother might actually win this fight. Mara wished she felt half as confident. "What happens now?" Leora asked, wiping her face with her sleeve. "Now I figure out how to fight someone with all the legal power and most of the money." Mara tried to smile, but it felt wrong on her face. "I have no idea what I'm doing." "But you're doing it anyway." "Yes, foolish, probably." "Brave." Leora grabbed her mother's hands. "This is the first time since you married him that you've actually stood up to him." "I've stood up to him before." "No. You've argued, you've objected, but you've never actually defied him. There's a difference." Maybe there was. Maybe that's what had shifted. Mara had stopped trying to negotiate within the system Draven controlled and started trying to break the system itself. The thought terrified her. Edmund appeared in the doorway, hesitant. "Is it safe to come back?" "Come in," Mara said. "We need to talk." The young man entered cautiously, like he was approaching a wounded animal. Up close, Mara could see he was probably 22 or 23, with kind eyes and soft hands that suggested he'd never done hard labor. His clothes were expensive but not ostentatious, new money trying to look established. "Mr. Price," Mara said, "tell me about your intentions toward my daughter." "Mother," Leora started, but Mara held up a hand. "Let him answer." Edmund straightened his shoulders. "I love her. I want to marry her. I can provide for her. My father's business is successful, and I have my own prospects." "Why Leora? You've known her, what, 3 days?" "4. And I know it's fast, but sometimes you just know, don't you? When something's right?" Mara thought about her own marriage, the opposite of right, forced by circumstance and maintained by legal contracts. "What makes you think this is right?" She's clever and fierce and doesn't pretend to be anything she's not. She challenges me, makes me want to be better. He glanced at Leora with obvious affection. Plus, she's beautiful, but I figure that's obvious. Leora flushed pink. And if I fight for your right to marry her, Mara said carefully, and we lose, what then? Will you still want her when she's trapped here under Draven's control indefinitely? I'd wait, however long it takes. Even if it takes years. If Draven makes it impossible for you to see her? Yes. That's easy to say now, harder to live through. Edmund met her eyes. My father made his fortune through persistence. Told me the difference between successful people and failures is that successful people don't quit when things get difficult. I don't quit, Mrs. Whitlock. That's not who I am. It was a pretty speech. Mara wondered if he believed it or if he was just young enough not to understand how reality ground down even the most persistent people. But then again, maybe persistence was exactly what this situation needed. All right, she said, I'll fight for Leora's right to choose. But you need to understand something. Draven is powerful, connected, and utterly ruthless. This won't be easy. I understand. Do you? Really? Because fighting him might destroy your family's reputation. It might cost your father business. It might ruin your prospects. Some things are worth the risk. Mara looked at her daughter, saw the desperate plea in her eyes, and made another choice she'd probably regret. Then we'll fight together. The first problem was finding a lawyer willing to go up against Duke Draven. Mara spent the next 2 days writing letters, calling in old favors, reaching out to anyone who might know someone with legal expertise and a willingness to take an unpopular case. Most didn't respond. The few who did politely declined, citing conflicts of interest or scheduling issues or any excuse that didn't require them to admit they were afraid of Draven's influence. On the third day, she got an unexpected visitor. Lord Garrett Thorne arrived unannounced, dressed for riding, his horse tied outside the front door. Mrs. Draven, he said when she met him in the entrance hall, I heard through certain channels that you're in need of legal assistance. How did you... Society is smaller than you think. Word travels fast when a duchess starts looking for lawyers to challenge her husband. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. May we speak privately? They went to the study, Draven's domain, but he wasn't there. He'd been absent for days, staying in town, presumably preparing his own legal strategy. I shouldn't be talking to you, Mara said. My husband would consider this inappropriate. Your husband considers everything inappropriate that he doesn't control. That's rather his defining characteristic. Thorne settled into a chair without being invited. I know a lawyer, good one, specializes in family law and has a reputation for taking difficult cases. Why are you helping me? Several reasons. First, I dislike bullies, and your husband is a bully in expensive clothes. Second, I believe in people having the right to make their own choices, even bad ones. Third, he paused. My sister was in a similar position once, married to a man who controlled everything. By the time she tried to fight back, she'd lost too much of herself to win. What happened to her? She's still married to him, still performing the role of dutiful wife, still dying slowly inside. His expression hardened. I couldn't help her. Maybe I can help you. Mara wanted to trust him, wanted to believe this offer was genuine, but Draven had taught her to question every gesture, suspect every kindness. What do you get out of this? The satisfaction of being a thorn in Draven's side. We have history. What kind of history? The kind where he cost me something I valued, and I've been looking for an opportunity to return the favor. He stood. The lawyer's name is Catherine Wright. She practices in the capital. I'll send her your details if you'd like to meet. I can't afford expensive lawyers. Mrs. Wright has been known to take cases pro bono when they interest her. I suspect yours will interest her very much. After he left, Mara sat in the study trying to decide if she'd just made an ally or walked into another trap. Catherine Wright arrived a week later, a sharp-faced woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She spent 2 hours reviewing the marriage contracts, the guardianship documents, and the circumstances of Leora's potential engagement. This is complicated, she said finally, setting down the last document. Your husband structured these contracts carefully. He has significant legal authority over both you and your daughter. Can we challenge it? Challenge? Yes. Win. That's harder to predict. Mrs. Wright tapped her fingers on the desk. The issue is precedent. Courts generally favor maintaining family stability and upholding marital authority. Judges are reluctant to override a husband's decisions unless there's clear evidence of harm or incompetence. He's controlling every aspect of our lives. Isn't that harm? Legally? No, that's called marriage. The lawyer's voice was dry. Unless he's physically abusing you or demonstrably insane, courts will likely support his authority. Mara felt her brief hope crumbling. So there's nothing we can do. I didn't say that. I said it's complicated. Mrs. Wright leaned back in her chair. The guardianship over your daughter is more vulnerable than your marriage contracts. You're her natural mother. That carries legal weight. If we can demonstrate that Draven's control is damaging to Leora's welfare, we might convince a judge to limit his authority over her marriage decisions. How do we demonstrate that? By showing pattern of behavior, excessive control, isolation, decisions made against her stated preferences and best interests. The lawyer paused. Has he restricted her freedom, limited her social interactions, made decisions that seemed designed to maintain control rather than protect her welfare? Mara thought about the staff reductions, the budget cuts, the way Draven had restructured their entire lives around his preferences. Yes, to all of it. Then we have material to work with. But I need you to understand something, Mrs. Whitlock. This will get ugly. Draven will fight back, and he has resources you don't. He'll paint you as an unstable woman trying to undermine proper authority. He'll question your judgment, your competence, possibly your mental state. He already does that privately. Might as well make it public. Mrs. Wright smiled, sharp and approving. Good. You'll need that spine. Now, let's discuss strategy. They worked for hours, building a case brick by brick, documenting every decision Draven had made without consultation, every restriction he'd imposed, every way he'd prioritized control over Leora's well-being. When Mrs. Wright finally left, Mara felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not hope exactly, but the absence of total despair. It wasn't much, but it was something. Leora had been waiting in the morning room. She practically launched herself at Mara when she appeared. What did she say? Can we fight him? Can I marry Edmund? Maybe. It's complicated, but we have a chance. A real chance? Real enough to try. Leora hugged her so hard Mara's ribs ached. Thank you. Thank you for not giving up. I haven't won yet, but you're trying. That's what matters. Mara wished she felt as certain. Draven returned 3 days later, arriving in the evening with his usual entourage. Mara heard the horses, the voices, the sound of him taking possession of the house again. She waited in the study, knowing he'd come find her eventually. He appeared in the doorway exactly an hour after his arrival, still in his traveling clothes, his face unreadable. So, he said, you've hired Catherine Wright. How did you? I pay attention. It's what I do. He moved into the room, closing the door behind him. She's good. Expensive, but good. Though I'm curious how you're paying her. Lord Thorne arranged it. Something flickered across Draven's face. Of course he did. Garrett Thorne, still nursing his grudges. What grudge? Ancient history. Not relevant. He poured himself a drink from the sideboard without asking. You're making a mistake, Mara. You've said that before, because it remains true. You can't win this fight. Mrs. Wright thinks we have a case. Mrs. Wright is taking your money, or Thorne's money, and telling you what you want to hear. That's how lawyers work when they know they're going to lose. Maybe, but at least I'm fighting instead of just accepting whatever you decide. Draven took a long drink, studying her over the rim of his glass. You've changed. You've been trying to change me since we married. Surprised it finally took? This isn't the change I wanted. I wanted you to accept reality, not declare war on it. Same thing, different framing. He laughed, short and bitter. Fair enough. He set down his glass. I'm going to give you one chance to back down from this. Withdraw the petition, send Edmund Price away, and we'll return to the previous arrangement. I'll even consider being more consultative on household decisions going forward. More consultative, not actually give me equal input. Equal input when you demonstrate equal competence. You're learning, but you're not there yet. The casual condescension made Mara's blood boil. No. No to which part? All of it. I'm not backing down. I'm not sending Edmund away. and I'm done pretending your control is partnership. Then you're choosing the hard path. Apparently that's who I am now. Draven moved closer, his expression hardening. Let me be very clear about what the hard path looks like. I will fight this petition with everything I have. I will demonstrate to the court that you're an emotional, unstable woman making decisions based on sentiment rather than reason. I will show that your daughter is a naive girl who doesn't understand what's in her best interests. I will paint Edmund Price as an opportunistic social climber taking advantage of a vulnerable family. He's not. It doesn't matter what he is. It matters what I can make him look like. And I'm very good at that. You're threatening me. I'm warning you. There's a difference. He paused. When I win, and I will win, things will change. You'll have proven you can't be trusted with autonomy. I'll have no choice but to restrict your freedoms accordingly. Is that really what you want? I want you to stop treating people like chess pieces. People are chess pieces. The sooner you accept that, the easier your life becomes. That's a sad way to see the world. It's an accurate way. Sentiment is for people who can afford it. We can't. Mara stood, meeting his eyes directly. Maybe I can't afford sentiment, but I also can't afford to lose what's left of myself. So I'm fighting. And if I lose, at least Leora will know I tried. Noble. Pointless, but noble. Better than practical and soulless. For a moment, something like hurt flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual cold calculation. The hearing is set for 3 weeks from tomorrow. Be prepared. He left without another word. The next 3 weeks were a blur of preparation. Mrs. Wright was relentless, drilling Mara on testimony, preparing her for cross-examination, building the case piece by piece. He'll try to provoke you, the lawyer said during one session, make you angry, make you cry, make you look unstable. You need to stay calm no matter what he says. That's asking a lot. That's what winning requires. They practiced responses to every horrible thing Draven might say, every accusation, every insinuation, every attempt to paint her as incompetent or hysterical. It was exhausting. Leora was a constant presence, attending every preparation session, taking notes, asking questions. Edmund came when he could, providing support, and occasionally getting thrown out by Mrs. Wright when he became too emotional about the whole thing. He's useless in a courtroom, the lawyer said after one such ejection. Sweet, but useless. Make sure he stays quiet during the actual hearing. The village took notice, of course. Word spread that the Duchess was challenging her husband in court. Some were scandalized, others fascinated, a few quietly supportive. Mrs. Venn, in her final week of employment, pulled Mara aside one morning. I wanted to say something before I go, the older woman said. I misjudged you. Thought you were just going to accept whatever the Duke decided. I'm glad I was wrong. I might still lose. Maybe. But you're fighting. That counts for something. On her last day, Mrs. Venn gave Mara a sealed letter. Don't open this unless you need it, but if things get desperate, it might help. What is it? Information about certain financial irregularities I noticed when I was still managing household accounts, before the Duke's people took over. She hesitated. It might be nothing, but it might be leverage. Mara wanted to open it immediately, but Mrs. Venn stopped her. Only if you need it. Using that information has consequences. Make sure you're willing to pay them. After she left, Mara hid the letter in her room, trying not to think about what desperate measures might require desperate information. The night before the hearing, Mara couldn't sleep. She paced her room, reviewing testimony in her head, trying to prepare for every possible outcome. A knock at her door startled her. Draven stood in the hallway, looking tired in a way she'd never seen him. Can we talk? He asked. It's late. I'm aware. Can we talk anyway? She let him in, wary. He moved to the window, staring out at the dark grounds. Last chance to back down, he said quietly. Is that really why you're here? Partially, but also... He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. I want you to understand something. What I'm going to do tomorrow, the things I'm going to say about you, it's not personal. How is it not personal? It's strategy. It's what's necessary to win, but it doesn't reflect what I actually think of you. And what do you actually think of me? He was quiet for a long moment. I think you're stronger than you realize. Smarter than you give yourself credit for. And braver than is probably wise given your circumstances. The words hung between them, surprisingly honest. Then why are you doing this? Mara asked. If you actually respect me, why fight so hard to control me? Because respect and control aren't mutually exclusive. I can recognize your strengths while still believing you need guidance, still believing that I know better how to navigate these waters. That's not respect. That's condescension dressed up in pretty language. Maybe. He turned to face her. Or maybe it's the reality that experience matters, that some people are better equipped to make certain decisions, that equality doesn't mean everyone's judgment is equally valid. And you've decided you have better judgment than me. In most matters? Yes. Is that arrogance or accuracy? Probably both. Mara shook her head. You came here to make one last attempt at talking me down. I came here to see if there was any version of tomorrow that doesn't end with us destroying each other in public. You mean any version where I surrender? I mean any version where we both walk away intact. There isn't. You made sure of that when you structured this marriage to give yourself all the power. I structured it to be stable. You're the one choosing to destabilize it. No, you destabilized it by treating me like property. I'm just finally responding appropriately. He moved toward the door, then paused. Tomorrow is going to be ugly. Things will be said that can't be unsaid. Are you prepared for that? Are you? I've been preparing for hard conversations my whole life. Have you? I guess we'll find out. After he left, Mara stood at the window watching his shadow cross the lawn toward the east wing. Tomorrow would change everything. One way or another, after tomorrow there would be no going back to the careful detente they'd maintained. She was either about to win her daughter's freedom or lose everything. The hearing was held in the regional court, a stone building that smelled of old wood and older authority. The gallery was packed, apparently Duchess versus Duke made for compelling entertainment. Mara sat with Mrs. Wright at one table, Lyora behind them in the gallery with Edmund. Across the aisle, Draven sat with his own lawyer, a severe man named Pemberton, who had a reputation for demolishing witnesses. The judge was a gray-haired woman named Hartwell, known for being fair but traditional. Not ideal, but not the worst option either. All rise, the bailiff called. The hearing began. Pemberton went first, painting Mara as an emotional woman making reckless decisions. He argued that Draven, as legal guardian and husband, had the right and responsibility to guide his stepdaughter's choices. The petitioner would have this court believe that Duke Draven is some sort of tyrant, Pemberton said, his voice dripping with disdain. In reality, he's a concerned parent trying to protect a naive young woman from an imprudent match. Mr. Price is, frankly, beneath Miss Whitlock's station. This proposed marriage would limit her prospects, not expand them. Mrs. Wright countered with their carefully built case, the pattern of control. The decisions made without consultation. The systematic removal of Lyora's autonomy. This isn't about whether Mr. Price is appropriate, Mrs. Wright argued. It's about whether Miss Whitlock has the right to make her own choice. Her stepfather has demonstrated a pattern of prioritizing control over her welfare. This court should limit his guardianship authority accordingly. Then came the testimony. Lyora went first, describing life under Draven's control. She was nervous but clear, her voice steady as she talked about feeling trapped, watched, her every decision subject to approval. Pemberton's cross-examination was brutal. You're 19 years old, correct? Yes. How many serious relationships have you had? I don't see how that's relevant. Answer the question, please. None. Edmund is my first real relationship. I see. So you have no experience with romance or courtship, yet you believe you're qualified to choose a life partner after knowing Mr. Price for less than a month? I know what I feel. Feelings. Yes. Tell me, Miss Whitlock, have you considered that what you feel might be infatuation rather than love? That you might be confusing rescue from your circumstances with genuine affection? I'm not confused. Of course not. 19-year-olds never are. The sarcasm was thick. Let's discuss your circumstances. You live in a comfortable home, have all your needs met, face no financial hardship. What exactly are you being rescued from? From being controlled? By a stepfather who provides for you, ensures your safety, and tries to guide you toward appropriate matches? That's control you object to? Yes. I see. So proper parental guidance is oppression in your view. That's not what I said. Then what are you saying, Miss Whitlock? That you should be allowed to do whatever you want with no oversight? That your stepfather's experience and wisdom count for nothing? That a 19-year-old's whims should override adult judgment? I'm saying I should have a voice in my own future. A voice, not the only voice, and that's what your stepfather is providing. Guidance, not imprisonment. The fact that you dislike his guidance doesn't make it oppression. By the time Pemberton finished, Leora was in tears, and Mara wanted to throw something at the smug lawyer's head. Edmund's testimony went similarly. Pemberton painted him as an opportunistic merchant trying to marry above his station, taking advantage of family discord for social advancement. Then it was Mara's turn. She took the stand trying to channel Mrs. Wright's coaching. Stay calm. Answer directly. Don't let them provoke you. Mrs. Wright led her through the basics, the circumstances of the marriage, Draven's pattern of control, the systematic removal of her autonomy. Then Pemberton stood for cross-examination, and Mara felt her pulse spike. Mrs. Draven, you entered into marriage with my client voluntarily, correct? Under duress, yes. Duress. You mean he offered you a solution to your financial crisis? He threatened to foreclose unless I married him. He gave you a choice between two options. That's not a threat. That's an offer. When one option is total ruin, it's not really a choice. Interesting perspective. So whenever someone makes a difficult decision, they're under duress? Whenever circumstances are less than ideal, any agreement made is invalid. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? That you agreed to marry my client, signed legal contracts, made binding vows, but now want to invalidate those agreements because you regret them? I want to limit how much control those agreements give him over my daughter. The daughter you couldn't support on your own. The daughter who would have faced destitution if my client hadn't intervened. You want this court to reduce his authority over a girl he's financially supporting? I want her to have autonomy over her own marriage. At 19, with no life experience, all based on a weeks-old infatuation with a boy from a merchant family. Pemberton's voice dripped contempt. Tell me, Mrs. Draven, if your daughter wanted to marry a stable hand or a traveling performer, would you support that choice too? Or do you only support her autonomy when it aligns with your own emotional preferences? Edmund is a good man from a respectable family, but not noble, not landed, not appropriate for a duke's stepdaughter, which your daughter only became because my client rescued your family from ruin. He didn't rescue us. He exploited our situation. Exploitation. Strong word. Let's examine it. He paid your debts, saved your estate, provided security for both you and your daughter, and in return he expected basic cooperation and respect. That's exploitation. He expected total control. He expected functional partnership. You're the one who decided that meant surrender rather than collaboration. Because there's no collaboration, he makes every decision without consulting me. Consulting and obeying aren't the same thing, Mrs. Draven. Perhaps the issue isn't that he doesn't consult you, it's that he doesn't always agree with you, and you've decided that disagreement equals oppression. Mara felt her control slipping. You're twisting everything. I'm clarifying. You want authority without responsibility. You want your daughter to make her own choices, but only when those choices align with your preferences. You want independence from your husband's judgment while still enjoying the security his resources provide. That's not autonomy, Mrs. Draven. That's hypocrisy. That's enough, Mrs. Wright interjected, standing. Counsel is badgering the witness. Sustained, Judge Hartwell said. Move on, Mr. Pemberton. But the damage was done. Mara could see it in the judge's face, in the gallery's expressions. Pemberton had successfully painted her as an ungrateful, emotional woman trying to undermine legitimate authority. When she stepped down, her hands were shaking. The final witness was Draven himself. He took the stand looking calm, controlled, entirely reasonable. The opposite of Mara's emotional testimony. His lawyer led him through a careful narrative. The desperate state of the Whitlock estate. The generous terms he'd offered. His attempts to guide both Mara and Leora toward wise decisions. I understand my wife is unhappy with certain restrictions, Draven said, his voice measured. But those restrictions exist for good reason. Miss Whitlock is young and inexperienced. Mr. Price, while respectable, is not an appropriate match given her position. I'm not trying to control her future. I'm trying to protect it. And if the court limits your guardianship, Pemberton asked, then I'll respect that decision. But I believe it would be a mistake. Sometimes protection feels like control to people who haven't yet learned why certain boundaries exist. It was perfect, calm, reasonable, paternalistic in the best possible way. Mrs. Wright's cross-examination tried to chip away at his facade. You've made numerous decisions about the Whitlock estate without consulting Mrs. Draven, correct? I've made management decisions within my authority as the primary financial stakeholder, including firing long-term staff, including restructuring to ensure sustainability, yes. Did you consult Mrs. Draven before firing her housekeeper of 25 years? I informed her. The decision was mine to make, without her input. She had the opportunity to provide input. I weighed it against other factors and made what I believed was the correct choice, the choice that aligned with your preferences, the choice that aligned with financial reality. Back and forth they went, Mrs. Wright trying to expose his control, Draven deflecting every thrust with reasonable-sounding explanations. Finally, Mrs. Wright played what she'd positioned as their strongest card. Duke Draven, you've testified that you're trying to protect Miss Whitlock's future, but isn't it true that blocking this marriage serves your interests rather than hers? How so? An unmarried stepdaughter remains under your authority. A married one does not. You benefit from maintaining control, do you not? I benefit from making wise decisions for my family. If Miss Whitlock made a suitable match, I'd support it enthusiastically. Mr. Price simply isn't suitable. By whose standards? By any reasonable standards. He lacks land, title, significant wealth. The match would be a step down for her, or it would be a chance for her to build her own life independent of your control. Independence from guidance isn't freedom, Mrs. Wright. It's abandonment. I won't abandon my responsibility to protect her from poor choices. It was masterful. Every answer framed his control as protection, his restrictions as wisdom. When both sides rested, Judge Hartwell announced she'd deliver her decision in 1 week. The wait was excruciating. Mara couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything except the upcoming verdict. Draven maintained his distance, working from town, only returning to the estate twice for brief visits. He was cordial but cold, treating Mara like a business associate who'd filed a complaint with management. Leora was a wreck, alternating between hope and despair. Edmund stayed close, trying to be supportive, mostly just being young and overwhelmed. Mrs. Wright tried to prepare her for potential outcomes. Best case, the judge limits Draven's guardianship authority and lets Leora marry with your consent alone. And worst case, the judge upholds his authority completely and possibly expands it based on your demonstrated unwillingness to cooperate. So I could end up with less freedom than I started with. It's possible, that's the risk you took. On the day of the verdict, Mara dressed carefully, subdued colors, modest cut, nothing that could be read as defiant or frivolous. She looked like a respectable woman seeking reasonable accommodations. She felt like she might vomit. The courtroom was packed again. Apparently the verdict was as entertaining as the hearing. Judge Hartwell entered, her expression giving nothing away. I've reviewed the testimony and evidence carefully, she began. This case presents a conflict between traditional guardianship authority and a young woman's right to self-determination. Both sides make valid points. Mara's heart was hammering so hard she could barely hear. Duke Draven has demonstrated his commitment to his stepdaughter's welfare. His concerns about the proposed match are not unreasonable. However, that word hung in the air, pregnant with possibility. However, the pattern of decision-making without meaningful consultation is concerning. While a guardian has authority to guide and protect, that authority should not extend to absolute control over a young woman's choice of spouse, particularly when the proposed match is to a respectable man from a decent family, and when the primary objection appears to be social status rather than character or capability. Mara felt hope flaring. Therefore, I'm ruling as follows. Duke Draven's guardianship over Miss Leora Whitlock is hereby limited. He retains financial authority and general guidance, but decisions regarding her marriage require the consent of both guardians, himself and her mother. Neither can unilaterally approve or deny a match. Both must agree. It wasn't everything they'd hoped for, but it was something. Furthermore, Judge Hartwell continued, given Miss Whitlock's age and demonstrated maturity, her own preferences should be given substantial weight in any marital decision. This court encourages all parties to remember that guardianship is meant to protect, not imprison. The gavel came down. Mara sat frozen, trying to process what had just happened. They'd won. Not completely, but enough. Enough to matter. Beside her, Mrs. Wright was smiling grimly. Not bad. Could be worse. Across the aisle, Draven was speaking with Pemberton, his expression unreadable. Leora pushed through the gallery railing, throwing herself at Mara. We won. Did we win? We didn't lose, Mara said, hugging her daughter tight. That's something. Edmund appeared, grinning like an idiot. So we can marry, with your permission. With both our permissions, mine and Draven's. But he'll never agree. Then we'll have to convince him. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like a temporary reprieve before the next battle. Draven approached as the courtroom cleared. His face was carved from ice. Congratulations, he said. You've won the right to negotiate. I hope you're prepared for what that actually means. What does it mean? It means nothing happens without my agreement, which means you're still dependent on my goodwill. You've gained a voice, not authority. It's more than I had before. Is it? You still can't act without me. You've just ensured that every decision becomes a negotiation where I hold most of the leverage. Well played. He walked away, leaving Mara standing there with her partial victory feeling increasingly hollow. But then Leora squeezed her hand and Edmund looked at her with grateful eyes, and she realized something. She'd fought. She'd actually fought and gained ground. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. And for the first time since marrying Draven, she'd proven that his control wasn't absolute, that she could push back and survive. That might not be victory, but it was power. And power, even small power, was something she could work with. Power, even small power, was something she could work with. The thought sustained Mara through the carriage ride home, through Leora's nervous chatter and Edmund's optimistic plans. But when they pulled up to the estate and she saw Draven's horse already tied outside, he'd ridden ahead faster than the carriage, reality settled back over her like a familiar weight. She'd won a battle. The war was far from over. He was waiting in the study, of course. Standing by the window with a glass of whiskey, his posture radiating controlled fury. We need to discuss terms, he said without turning. Terms for what? For whatever negotiation you think you've won the right to have. Now he turned, his eyes cold. The judge gave you a voice. That doesn't mean I have to listen. Actually, it does. Neither of us can approve Leora's marriage without the other's consent. That means we both have veto power. Exactly. Which means this marriage to Edmund Price will never happen, because I'll never agree to it. Mara felt her brief triumph souring. You'd really keep refusing out of spite? Not spite. Principle. He's not appropriate for her. By what measure? He's respectable, employed, from a good family. He's a merchant. She's the stepdaughter of a duke. The disparity is unacceptable. To whom? To you, or to whatever social climbing strategy you're pursuing? Draven set down his glass with deliberate care. You think this is about ambition? It's about protecting her future options. If she marries Price, she closes doors that would otherwise remain open. What doors? Be specific. Connections to nobility, potential matches to titled families, access to court circles that could benefit her, and any children she has. For generations. You're talking about her like she's a chess piece again. I'm talking about her like someone whose future I'm responsible for protecting. That's what guardians do. Guardians also listen to what their wards actually want. When their wards are old enough to know what's good for them, yes, Leora is 19 and infatuated. That's not wisdom, that's hormones. The casual dismissal made Mara want to scream. She's not a child. She's not fully adult either. That's the whole point of guardianship, bridging that gap with guidance from people who have perspective she lacks. Perspective. Is that what we're calling your need to control everything? We're going in circles. Draven moved to the desk, pulling out a document. I've drafted a compromise proposal. Edmund Price can court Leora properly. Supervised visits, public outings, appropriate oversight. If after 1 year they're still interested in marriage, and if Price has demonstrated financial stability and social aptitude, I'll consider reconsidering my position. 1 year of you looking for any excuse to reject him. 1 year of him proving he's worthy. If he truly loves her, he'll wait. And if you use that year to sabotage them, restrict their meetings, make it impossible for them to maintain the relationship? I'm offering structured courtship. That's more than most guardians would allow after this debacle. He slid the document across the desk. Take it or leave it. Mara picked up the paper, scanning the terms. Visits limited to twice weekly, always chaperoned. No private correspondence without oversight. No discussion of marriage during the probationary period. It was a cage with prettier bars. This is unacceptable. It's my offer. The alternative is I exercise my veto immediately and we're done. Then I exercise mine on any match you propose for her. Fine. She remains unmarried indefinitely. I can live with that. Can you? It was checkmate disguised as negotiation. He'd structured it so that refusing his terms meant condemning Leora to permanent limbo. You're a bastard, Mara said quietly. Yes, but I'm a bastard offering a path forward. That's more than you had this morning. She wanted to tear up the document, wanted to tell him exactly what she thought of his manipulative compromise. But Leora's face flashed in her mind, hopeful, desperate, needing her mother to find a way through this. I need to discuss it with Leora. Of course. You have until tomorrow evening. After that, the offer expires and I revert to absolute refusal. He left her alone with the document and her rage. Leora took the news about as well as expected. 1 year, supervised? Mother, he's setting impossible conditions. They were in Mara's room. The compromise proposal spread on the bed between them. Edmund had been sent home. This conversation needed to be just mother and daughter. I know the conditions are harsh, Mara said, but they're better than an outright refusal. Barely. He's going to spend the whole year looking for reasons to reject Edmund. You know he will. Probably, but if Edmund is serious about you, he'll endure it. That's not fair to him or to me. No, but fair isn't on the menu right now. This is what we have. Leora's eyes filled with tears. I thought we won. I thought the court ruling meant something. It meant we get to negotiate. This is negotiation. This is surrender. The word hit hard because it was partially true. They'd fought for autonomy and gotten back structured control. A prettier cage, but still a cage. Not surrender, Mara said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. Strategic retreat. We take this offer, we prove Edmund is serious, we build a case over the next year that Draven can't reasonably reject. And if he rejects it anyway? Then we go back to court with evidence of his unreasonableness. The judge said her preferences should be given substantial weight. If we can show he's being arbitrary rather than protective, we might win fuller autonomy. It sounded good, logical, strategic, but Mara could see in her daughter's face that Leora wasn't buying it. You're doing it again, the girl said quietly. Doing what? Justifying his control, finding ways to work within his system instead of breaking it. Because breaking it hasn't worked. We tried fighting directly and got partial victory at best. Now we work within what we won. For how long? How many years of working within his system before we're allowed to actually live our own lives? Mara had no answer for that. They sat in silence for a while. Then Leora spoke again, her voice small. Do you regret it? Marrying him? Every day. Then why are you still defending his decisions? I'm not defending them. I'm surviving them. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I sit, you've spent months telling yourself that submission is strategy, that accepting his control is smart rather than weak, and now you're trying to convince me to do the same. The accusation burned because there was truth in it. Mara had spent so long justifying her choices, finding ways to live with Draven's control, that she'd started to internalize his logic. What do you want me to do? Mara asked. Tell me. What would you do differently? I'd refuse his terms. Tell him to withdraw his veto, or I'll make life unbearable for him. With what leverage? What exactly would you threaten? I don't know, but there has to be something, some way to make him back down. There isn't. I've looked. We have a court order that gives us shared authority, but he has all the practical power, money, connections, legal standing. We can make noise, but we can't make him do anything he doesn't want to do. Leora stood abruptly, pacing to the window. I hate this. I hate feeling powerless. I know, so do I. Then do something about it. I'm trying. This compromise, it's not perfect, but it's movement. It's better than nothing. It's surrender dressed up as strategy. Maybe, but it's the best I can offer right now. Her daughter turned from the window, face streaked with tears. I'm going to lose Edmund. He'll wait a few months, see how impossible Draven makes everything, and give up. and I'll be trapped here forever. If he gives up that easily, he's not worth having. Easy for you to say. You're not the one watching your future being controlled by someone who sees you as property. The words landed like a slap. Mara opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. Because Leora was right. Mara had already surrendered to being Draven's controlled wife. She'd stopped fighting for herself, and now she was asking her daughter to accept the same fate. "You're right," Mara said quietly. Leora blinked. "What?" "You're right. I have been justifying his control, accepting his framing, working within his system instead of challenging it." She stood, something crystallizing in her mind. "I'll find another way." "How?" "I don't know yet, but there has to be leverage somewhere, something he wants or fears enough to make him negotiate in good faith." "Mother, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do, because you're right about all of it. I've been surviving instead of fighting, accepting crumbs and calling it victory. I'm done with that." Leora's expression shifted from anger to concern. "What are you going to do?" "Whatever it takes." After Leora left, Mara sat alone thinking about leverage and power and the letter Mrs. Venn had given her, the one she was only supposed to open if things got desperate. Things felt pretty desperate. She retrieved the letter from its hiding place, broke the seal, and read. The contents made her stomach drop. Mrs. Venn had documented discrepancies in Draven's financial records. Nothing overtly illegal, but questionable. Funds moved between accounts in ways that suggested he was hiding assets, possibly to avoid taxation or obscure the true extent of his wealth. There were also references to certain arrangements with military suppliers during his time as a general that might not withstand scrutiny if investigated. It wasn't smoking gun evidence of crime, but it was enough to create serious problems if brought to the attention of the right people. Enough to damage his reputation, trigger audits, maybe even legal investigations. Enough to hurt him. The question was whether Mara was willing to use it. Using this information meant escalation, meant going from legal negotiation to outright warfare, meant potentially destroying the man she'd married to save her daughter. But didn't he deserve it? Hadn't he built his control on threats and manipulation? She read the letter 3 more times, trying to decide. The knock at her door startled her. She shoved the letter under a cushion. "Come in." Draven entered, and for a moment they just looked at each other, 2 people bound together by contracts and circumstances, each holding cards the other couldn't see. "Have you made a decision about the proposal?" he asked. "Not yet. The deadline is tomorrow evening." "I'm aware." He moved further into the room, and Mara was struck by how tired he looked. Not physically. Draven was always put together, but something in his eyes suggested exhaustion that went deeper than lack of sleep. "I know you think I'm being unreasonable," he said, "but I'm trying to protect her." "From what? From happiness? From choosing her own life? From making decisions that will limit her in ways she doesn't understand yet? From closing doors before she knows what's behind them? Or from escaping your control?" "That too," he admitted, surprising her with the honesty. "I won't pretend I don't prefer having authority over chaos, but that doesn't mean my concerns aren't genuine." Mara studied him. "What happened to you? What made you this way?" "This way meaning what?" "So afraid of losing control that you can't let anyone make their own choices." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved to sit in the chair by her window, staring out at the darkening grounds. "I had a daughter once," he said quietly. Mara went very still. "What?" "Years ago. Before the wars, before the title, when I was just a junior officer trying to prove myself. I married young. We had a daughter." His voice was flat, emotionless, like he was reporting facts rather than living through memories. "She died when she was 7, fever. Nothing exotic or dramatic, just a common illness that turned deadly. I'm sorry. Her mother, my wife, blamed me. Said I was too focused on my career, too absent, too controlling of the limited time we had together. She was probably right." He paused. "She left after the funeral. Remarried within a year to a merchant who was home every night. I heard she had more children. I'm glad for her." Mara didn't know what to say. "I learned something from that," Draven continued, "that the only things you can truly protect are the things you control completely. Everything else, everyone else, is vulnerable to forces beyond your reach. So when I have authority over someone's welfare, I exercise it absolutely. Because the alternative is watching them make choices that destroy them while I stand by powerless. That's not protection. That's trauma response. Perhaps. But it's kept people alive, kept estates functioning, kept chaos at bay. At what cost? Whatever cost is necessary. He turned to look at her. You think I don't know what I am? I know. I'm controlling and cold and incapable of trust. I've made my peace with it, because the alternative, being warm and trusting and watching everything collapse, I can't survive that again. For the first time since marrying him, Mara saw Draven clearly. Not as a villain or a tyrant, but as a broken man using control as a shield against a world that had hurt him beyond his capacity to heal. It didn't excuse his behavior, but it explained it. Your daughter wouldn't want this, Mara said quietly. Whatever happened to her, she wouldn't want you using her death as justification for controlling everyone around you. You didn't know her, no, but I know what it's like to love a daughter. And I know that love means letting them grow, even when it's terrifying, even when they might get hurt, or they might die. Yes, they might, but imprisoning them to prevent that isn't love. It's fear wearing love's face. Draven stood, moving toward the door. The proposal stands. You have until tomorrow evening. Wait. He paused. Mara thought about the letter hidden under the cushion, about the leverage it represented, about whether she was willing to use a dead daughter's memory against a man who'd already lost everything that mattered. What if I could give you something you want, she asked, in exchange for withdrawing your conditions on Leora's courtship? What could you possibly offer me? Cooperation. Real cooperation. I'll stop fighting you on household decisions. I'll play the dutiful Duchess in public. I'll make our marriage look like the partnership you wanted. She paused. But only if you let Leora court Edmund without restrictions. That's not much of an offer. You'll pretend to cooperate while resenting me? I already have that. No, this would be different. I'd actually work with you. No more court battles, no more public challenges, just peace. He studied her face, searching for the trap. Why would you do that? Because I'm tired of fighting. Because my daughter deserves happiness more than I deserve autonomy. Because maybe you're right that some battles can't be won, just survived. It hurt to say. Hurt to offer surrender in exchange for her daughter's freedom. But if that's what it took... No, Draven said. Mara blinked. What? I don't want your false cooperation bought with resentment. I don't want you playing a role while hating me. That's not partnership, that's performance. Then what do you want? I want you to understand why I make the decisions I make. I want you to trust that I'm not trying to hurt you or your daughter. I want... He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. I want you to stop looking at me like I'm a monster who has to be endured. Then stop acting like one. I'm acting like someone trying to prevent disasters before they happen. By creating different disasters. Can't you see that? They stared at each other, two people speaking different languages, neither able to bridge the gap. Finally, Draven shook his head. The proposal stands. Tomorrow evening. After he left, Mara pulled out Mrs. Venn's letter again. She could use this. Could threaten to expose his financial irregularities unless he backed down. Could force his cooperation through blackmail the same way he'd forced hers through debt. Fight fire with fire. Use his tactics against him. But then what? They'd live together in mutual destruction, each holding weapons aimed at the other, waiting for someone to pull the trigger first? That wasn't survival. That was mutually assured misery. There had to be another way. Mara spent the night thinking, and by dawn she had a plan. Dangerous, possibly stupid, but it was something. She found Draven at breakfast, already reviewing correspondence. I've made a decision about the proposal, she said. He set down his papers. And? I'm rejecting it. His expression hardened. Then I exercise my veto. Edmund Price is forbidden from courting Leora. And I exercise mine on any match you propose, which means we're at an impasse. An impasse I can maintain indefinitely. Can you? Actually, yes, because I'm done negotiating with you. Excuse me? Mara sat across from him, her hands steady despite her racing heart. You want control. You need it, probably because of trauma you've never processed. But what you're doing to Leora, what you've done to me, it's not protection. It's imprisonment. And I won't participate in it anymore. You don't have a choice. I always have a choice. Maybe not good ones, but choices nonetheless. She paused. I could use this. She slid Mrs. Venn's letter across the table. Draven picked it up, his expression unreadable as he read. When he finished, he set it down carefully. Financial irregularities. How interesting. Interesting enough to trigger investigations if I brought this to the right people. You're threatening me. I'm showing you that I have leverage, just like you showed me when you threatened foreclosure. And if I call your bluff? If I let you expose whatever Mrs. Venn thinks she found? Then we both lose. You face audits and scandal. I face whatever retaliation you devise. Leora watches her mother and stepfather destroy each other. Everyone suffers. So what are you proposing? Mara leaned forward. Real partnership. Not the version where you make all the decisions and I pretend to have input. Actual equality. We discuss major decisions. We compromise when we disagree. We treat each other like partners instead of adversaries. That's naive. Maybe. But it's the only way forward that doesn't end in mutual destruction. Draven was quiet for a long time, studying her face. You'd really use that letter? Really expose me? I don't want to, but I will if you force me to choose between your control and my daughter's freedom. That's not a partnership. That's hostage negotiation. Then call it mutually assured cooperation. We both have weapons. We both agree not to use them. And in that space, we try to actually work together. And if it doesn't work, then we're no worse off than we are now. He picked up the letter again, reading it more carefully. Mara watched emotions flicker across his face. Anger, calculation, something that might have been respect. You've changed, he said finally. You've been trying to change me since we married. Congratulations. This isn't the change I wanted. It's the change you got. He set down the letter. If I agree to this, and I'm not saying I am, what specifically are you asking for regarding Leora? Edmund courts her properly. No restrictions beyond normal propriety. If after 6 months they still want to marry and he's demonstrated he can support her, you give your consent. 6 months isn't enough time. It's twice as long as we knew each other before marrying. If it was enough for us, it's enough for them. He flinched at that. Our circumstances were different. Our circumstances were forced. Theirs is choice. That makes it more legitimate, not less. Draven stood, pacing to the window. You're asking me to trust that a 19-year-old knows what she wants. To believe that a merchant's son is worthy of a duke's stepdaughter. To give up control over a situation where I could prevent potential disaster. I'm asking you to let her live her life, even if it means she might get hurt, even if it means she might make mistakes. What if those mistakes destroy her? Then she'll learn from them. That's what life is. That's a terrible risk. It's the only risk worth taking. He was quiet for so long Mara thought he might refuse. Then, I want to meet with Edmund, privately, assess him myself without the courtroom drama. To find reasons to reject him? To understand who my stepdaughter has chosen. If he's genuine, if he's capable, if he actually loves her, I'll consider it. Consider isn't agree. It's the best I can offer right now. Mara studied his face, trying to read truth from calculation. And the partnership? Real cooperation, not performance? We can try. But understand something, Mara. I don't know how to do equal partnership. I know how to command and how to be obeyed. Everything else is foreign territory. Then we'll learn together. Or fail together? Also possible. He picked up Mrs. Venn's letter, walked to the fireplace and threw it in. They both watched it burn. There, he said, no more leverage, no more threats, just whatever this is. It's called trust, or the beginning of it. I'll try not to prove you wrong. It wasn't a promise, but it was something. Edmund's private meeting with Draven happened 3 days later. Mara wasn't allowed to attend. Draven insisted it needed to be just the two of them. She and Leora waited in the morning room, both too anxious to do anything productive. What if he finds some reason to reject Edmund? Leora asked for the 10th time. Then we deal with that when it happens. Mother, I can't. If he says no, I don't know what I'll do. You'll survive. We both will. That's what we do. The meeting lasted 2 hours. When Edmund finally emerged, he looked shaken, but not devastated. Well? Leora demanded. He's intense. Asked about my finances, my prospects, my family history. Wanted to know my plans for supporting you, where we'd live, how I'd handle social situations with nobility. Edmund ran a hand through his hair. It was like being interrogated by the crown's spy master. And? And he said he'd think about it. That's all? He said I passed the competence test. Now he needs to assess character over time. Wants to observe how we interact, how I treat you, whether I'm actually committed or just infatuated. Leora deflated. So more waiting. But not a rejection, Mara pointed out. That's progress. Over the following weeks, something shifted. Subtle at first, then increasingly noticeable. Draven started consulting Mara on household decisions. Not every decision, but significant ones. He'd present options, ask her opinion, actually listen when she disagreed. They argued still. That hadn't changed. But the arguments felt different, less like battle and more like negotiation. Two people with different perspectives trying to find common ground. He allowed Edmund to visit Leora 3 times a week, always with a chaperone, but with increasing flexibility about what activities were permitted. Walks in the garden, dinners with the family, even an afternoon visiting Edmund's family estate. Mara watched her daughter bloom, the strain and desperation fading into something that looked like actual happiness. He's changing, Leora said one evening after Edmund had left. Draven, he's actually changing. Or we're learning how to work with him instead of against him. Is there a difference? I'm not sure yet, but Mara was changing too. The constant tension that had defined her existence for months was easing. Not gone. She still woke some mornings feeling trapped, still had days where she wanted to scream at the constraints of her life. But the moments of peace were becoming more frequent than the moments of despair. One evening, Draven appeared at her door. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Of course." He entered, looking uncertain in a way she'd never seen. "I've been thinking about what you said, about my daughter, about using her death as justification for control." Mara waited. "You were right. She wouldn't want this, wouldn't want me turning into someone who suffocates people in the name of protection." He sat in the chair by her window, the same one he'd occupied weeks ago. "I don't know how to stop being that person, but I'm trying. I've noticed. It's hard. Letting go. Trusting. Every instinct I have screams that if I'm not controlling everything, disaster is inevitable. But so far, disaster hasn't struck. Not yet. But the fear is always there. That's what trust is. Choosing to hope instead of fear even when fear seems more logical." He smiled, bitter but genuine. "Hope. I'm not good at that. Neither am I anymore. But we can learn." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Draven spoke again. "I'm going to approve Edmund's courtship, formally. If after 6 months they still want to marry, I'll give my consent." Mara's breath caught. "Really?" "Don't make me repeat myself. I might change my mind." "What changed your mind?" "I watched them together. He treats her with respect, listens when she talks, doesn't try to control her or shape her into something she's not." He paused. "He's better for her than I was for you." "You don't know that." "I do. Because he chose her. I chose stability. There's a difference." Mara didn't know what to say to that. "For what it's worth," Draven continued, "I'm sorry. For how this marriage started. For the threats and manipulation. For treating you like a problem to be managed rather than a person to be partnered with. I'm sorry too. For hating you without trying to understand you. For seeing only the control and not the fear behind it. Mutual apologies, how civilized. We're learning. Apparently." He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Do you think we'll ever actually like each other? Or is tolerance the best we can hope for?" Mara considered. "I don't know, but I think we've moved past tolerance into something more like respect, maybe. That's worth something." "It is. More than I expected." After he left, Mara sat alone thinking about how complicated healing was. How two broken people could hurt each other terribly while trying to protect themselves. How power and fear and love could tangle into knots that took years to untangle. She thought about the woman she'd been when Draven first arrived, desperate, scared, willing to do anything to survive. And the woman she was now, scarred but stronger, compromised but not defeated, learning to exist in the space between surrender and rebellion. It wasn't the life she'd wanted, but it was the life she had, and maybe that was enough. The wedding took place 6 months later, exactly as promised. Small by noble standards, but large for a merchant family. Leora had wanted something between the two extremes, and for once, both families had agreed. Mara stood in the front row watching her daughter marry Edmund Price in the same garden where she'd married Draven under such different circumstances. The contrast was stark. Leora was radiant, genuinely happy, choosing this rather than being forced into it. Edmund looked at her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked, and Draven stood beside Mara, his expression neutral but his presence steady. When the ceremony concluded and Leora turned to face her family, her eyes found Mara first. "Thank you," she mouthed. Mara nodded, throat tight with emotion. At the reception, Edmund's father approached Draven with obvious nervousness. "Your Grace, I wanted to thank you for your blessing on this union." "No need for thanks. Your son passed every test. He's earned this." "Still, I know it wasn't an easy decision. Our families are different." "All families are different. What matters is whether they build each other up or tear each other down. Yours seems inclined toward building." After the merchant left, Mara touched Draven's arm. "That was kind. It was honest. His son is good to Leora. That's all that matters. You've come a long way from refusing to even consider him." "We both have. From a lot of things." They watched Leora dance with her new husband, both young and hopeful and convinced love could conquer anything. Mara envied them that certainty, even as she knew how complicated reality would make it. "Do you think they'll be happy?" Draven asked quietly. "I think they'll try. That's more than we did. We didn't have the luxury of trying." "No, but we have it now, if we want it." He turned to look at her. "Do you want to try?" Mara thought about the months since the court hearing, the gradual easing of tension, the slow building of something that might eventually become partnership, the fact that she could now be in the same room with Draven without feeling like she was suffocating. "I think I'm willing to find out," she said. "That's more than I expected." "We keep saying that. Maybe we should raise our expectations." "Maybe." He offered his hand. "Dance?" It was so unexpected that Mara almost laughed. "Are you serious?" "When am I not serious?" "Fair point." She took his hand and they moved onto the dance floor. It was awkward at first. They'd never danced together, not even at their own wedding. But gradually they found a rhythm, moving in sync, if not in perfect harmony. "I'm still not good at this," Draven said. "The partnership thing, the trust thing, all of it." "Neither am I, but we're better than we were." "Is that enough?" "It's a start." They danced while Leora and Edmund laughed nearby, while the sun set over the gardens, while music filled the air with something that sounded almost like hope. Mara thought about power and control and the price of both. Thought about how sometimes love lost to power, but sometimes, if you were lucky, if you fought, if you survived long enough, they learned to coexist. She'd never loved Draven the way she'd loved her first husband. Would never forget how this marriage started, forged in threats and desperation. But maybe that didn't matter. Maybe what mattered was what they built from the ruins of that beginning. A partnership. Imperfect, complicated, built on mutual survival rather than mutual affection. But real nonetheless. As the music swirled around them and her daughter's happiness shone like a beacon, Mara allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in over a year. Not happiness exactly, but possibility. And in a world where power usually destroyed everything soft, possibility felt like a small miracle. 3 years later, Mara sat in the study. No longer Draven's study, but theirs, reorganized to accommodate 2 desks, 2 perspectives, 2 people learning to share space. She was reviewing accounts when Draven entered with a letter. "From Leora," he said, handing it over. Mara read quickly, a smile spreading across her face. "She's pregnant, due in the spring." "Grandmother," Draven said. "That's quite a title." "One I'm looking forward to." She set down the letter. "Edmund's business is doing well, apparently. They're considering expanding. He's proven himself capable. I'm not surprised. High praise from you. Earned praise." They'd gotten better at this, the casual conversations, the shared updates, the moments of domestic normalcy. It had taken years, but somewhere along the way, the act of partnership had become less of an act. "I've been thinking," Mara said carefully. About the estate. About succession. Leora inherits. That's always been the plan. I know, but I want to make sure it's formalized properly, protected legally so there's no question. You don't trust me to honor that? I trust you. But I also believe in documentation. He laughed, surprising them both. Fair. I'll have the lawyers draw up papers. It was such a small thing, but it represented everything they'd built. Trust, yes, but trust verified. Partnership, but partnership protected by clear agreements. Respect without naivety. We've gotten good at this, Mara said. At what? At being married without destroying each other. Is that the metric for success? For us? Yes. Draven moved to the window, looking out at the grounds they'd restructured together over the years. Some of his efficiency, some of her beauty. Compromise made visible. I was wrong, he said quietly. When I told you sentiment was a luxury we couldn't afford. Oh? Some sentiment is essential, not the kind that clouds judgment, but the kind that reminds you why judgment matters in the first place. He turned to face her. You've taught me that, and you've taught me that strength sometimes looks like survival rather than victory. We've taught each other then. Apparently, he moved to his desk, pulling out documents he'd been working on. I'm revising my will, making sure everything is clear about what goes to you, what goes to Leora, what stays with the dukedom. Planning your demise? Planning for contingencies? It's what I do. I know. They worked in companionable silence for a while. Two people who'd learned to exist together without constant friction. It wasn't the marriage either of them had imagined, but it was real and functional and occasionally even pleasant. That night, as Mara prepared for bed, she thought about the woman she'd been when this started, desperate and scared and willing to trade everything for survival. She'd survived. But somewhere in the process of surviving, she'd also lived, not the life she'd wanted, not the life she'd choose if given the chance to start over, but a life nonetheless. One with moments of genuine partnership, hard-won respect, and the satisfaction of watching her daughter build something better. In the harsh land where power usually destroyed love, Mara had learned a different truth. Sometimes power and love could coexist. Not easily. Not perfectly. But possible if both parties were willing to fight for it, compromise for it, and occasionally forgive each other for being human. She'd paid a terrible price for that lesson. Her autonomy, her innocence, years of her life spent navigating someone else's control. But she'd also gained things she hadn't expected. Strength born from survival. Wisdom earned through suffering. The ability to exist in impossible situations and emerge not whole, she'd never be whole again, but functional. And in a world that measured success by survival rather than happiness, functional felt like victory. Draven knocked on her door, as he sometimes did before bed. Not for intimacy, they'd maintained separate rooms, separate lives in that regard, but for conversation. Come in. He entered, already in his nightshirt, looking more vulnerable than he did during the day. Leora's letter made me think, he said. About? About legacy. About what we leave behind. He sat in his usual chair. My daughter died leaving nothing behind but grief. I've spent years trying to prevent that same loss from happening again. I know. But maybe that's wrong. Maybe the point isn't to prevent loss, but to make sure that what exists, however long it exists, actually lives. That's very philosophical for this hour. Humor me. Mara smiled. All right, what brought this on? Leora's pregnancy. The thought of being a grandfather to a child I'll actually know, actually watch grow. It made me realize I've been so focused on preventing disaster that I've forgotten to allow joy. That's growth. It's terrifying. Joy usually is. That's what makes it valuable. He was quiet for a moment. Then, thank you for not giving up on me. On this, I know there were moments where you could have walked away. Where exactly would I have walked to? You could have made life unbearable until I let you go. Could have used that letter or found other leverage. Could have fought until one of us broke completely. I considered it. But you didn't. I chose survival over destruction, same as you. Is that really what this is? Mutual survival? Mara considered. It's mutual survival that became mutual respect that's becoming something more like partnership. Maybe even friendship eventually. Friendship. With your husband. How novel. Most marriages don't have it. Most marriages don't start with blackmail and threats. True, but most marriages don't become something better than how they started. We did that, against considerable odds. He stood, moving toward the door. Get some sleep. We have the estate review tomorrow. The review you'll want to complete in half the time I think it needs. Naturally. And we'll compromise on something in between. As always. After he left, Mara lay in the darkness thinking about compromise and partnership and the slow, painful process of two broken people learning to build something functional from their collective damage. It wasn't a love story. Would never be one. But it was a survival story that had become a partnership story that might eventually become a redemption story. And in the harsh land where power had once threatened to destroy everything, that felt like enough. More than enough. It felt like victory.